6:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. If everyone's here, declare the Board of Public Works meeting open. It is 6:01, Monday, February 22nd. At this juncture in the meeting, I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the remote meeting instructions.
So moved.
Waitman seconds.
Having a motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Waitman, aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. And all right, the only item on the agenda for the Public Works Board is a sewer abatement discussion. We have in our packets, I believe, a request. Mr. Buckley, would you like to fill us in?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if I could, please, I just want to review the process for people who watch this sort of thing. Not long after we raised rates back in July of 19, we came up with some procedures for people who wanted to apply for an abatement or petition for an abatement. And by means of practice, DPW will abate wastewater charges for leaks that don't go into the sewer system. So if you had a broken frozen pipes, by means of example, or a broken water heater, where that water doesn't go into the sewer system, but you obviously used a lot of water, we'll abate those charges. Similar to how we abate, we don't charge people who have a second meter when they water their lawn. And so we set up this procedure where if someone felt they were deserving of an abatement, they could write a letter to DPW, we would send it on to the Board of Public Works, and then it would be debated on its merit. If at that point, if a person still felt strong enough, they could appeal to come to the board and plead their case in person. Currently, whenever we take and review letters for abatement requests, no personal information or addresses are included. That's like I described. It's discussed on merit. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay.
Board members, any questions? Okay.
The letter is, I will go ahead. The letter is pretty straightforward. They describe a situation where they had a toilet running in an upstairs bathroom. And I have to be frank with you, toilet leaks are the single biggest cost for folks who don't know they're going on. And we typically don't abate sewer charges for problems of this nature because the water goes back down the drain. And these folks sound like they had a sizable one. It ran for several months, and if I read this correctly, approximately $1,200 more than their typical bill. Now, taken by itself, we don't have any, it doesn't fit the policy. We have no reason to abate these charges, with the exception that it's an excessive bill. And currently, there's no policies in place to address things like that. We talked about doing something like that at one point for senior citizens, or some type of a discount to help with items like that, but to date, nothing's been done. So does anyone have any questions on the letter itself? Has everyone had a chance to read it?
Does anyone have any questions? I don't think we have any, Joe. I think at this point, we would just need to make a decision whether or not to grant an abatement. If history serves me correct, Joe has brought these before us prior, and in similar instances, we have kind of set a precedent to not grant the abatement for issues of this nature. So I'm not sure if the board has any discussion or wants to make any comments on the request, but it's really up to the board in terms of how they want to decide.
Mitch, it's Leah. I have a question.
Mhm.
This is probably for Joe. This is an abatement for only the sewer charge though, correct? I assume the water charge either they paid or that was taken care of in another manner. This is simply $1,200 for sewer, yes?
I think it was their bill jumped by $1,200 overall. Is how I read the letter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so and correct me if I mean, it seems like the nature of this issue, they're using both water and sewer in excess, inadvertently, obviously, but it sounds like
Right, and if I could just call out a couple things. So when we do read all the meters, one of the clerk here goes through every account and looks for anything excessive, anything unusual, any highly unusual water use or highly low water use, and usually we'll send a letter out to the property owner and say, hey, we think you have something going on. We do go through that exercise. It's just that we bill quarterly, so it could pile up pretty quickly.
Okay. Jeff,
I just wanted you folks to know there's some stuff in place. Do you know what I mean? We do try and protect customers' interests.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that you've brought these before us before, and you've done a pretty good job in working with folks and having your staff take a look at it. Jeff, you have your hand up?
Just to follow up to Joe's comment, do we know if this unusual flow of water was flagged and were the people notified?
This one goes back a couple months. I usually try and wait till I have 2 or 3 before I come before the board, and luckily we haven't gotten a few. But this one was waiting, so I honestly can't remember, Jeff. I would imagine that was the case, but I can look into that if you'd like.
Mitch, it's Leah, if I may.
Go ahead, Leah.
I just, in response to Jeff's comment, the note that I see is that homeowners received a letter from DPW written October 19th, 2020, notifying them of the increased water usage, which prompted them to realize the problem and have it fixed on October 23rd. But then their November 2nd bill was $1,200 more. So I think that's to Joe's point that they do try to monitor it all, but it's not necessarily in the most timely fashion based on the quarterly billing and everything.
Yeah, I think to Leah's point, I think that shows that if anything, Joe's crew and staff probably alerted them to a problem that they would not have otherwise found out. So it's in some ways it's obviously bad for the homeowner, but in some ways it's good that they flagged it now versus letting out a quarter go by. So again, I just to move this along, I'll go ahead. I don't think do we need any action if we deny this, Joe? Do we get a motion for not abatement, or can we just take no action on it?
Typically, we take, I believe the motion, Mitch, is to take no action.
Okay.
You recommend taking no action on the request for the abatement?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to take no action.
I'll second.
The reason, okay, we have a motion and a second for discussion. The reason being that if we do abate it, this cost is spread over the other ratepayers, and I think that that's a little unfair given the nature of the issue. I know it's not something that's fortunate, and it's tough, but I can't see justifying spreading this over the other ratepayers. Do you have any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Recity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you all. I believe that is the only item for discussion to come before the Board of Public Works. Because usually we transfer right into the select board meetings here. However, because with the electronic calendar, the posting, even though it says on the agenda 6 p.m. for the select board meeting, the town calendar itself indicates 6:30. So just to play our bases safe, I think it's worth it for us to wait 15 minutes to begin our select board meeting if everyone's okay with that. And we will just convene again at 6:30. That being said, I would entertain a motion to close out the Board of Public Works meeting.
So moved.
I would just want to thank you folks. Have a good one.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Appreciate you and all your hard work and your team.
Second.
Just stay safe on the roads.
We have a motion and a second. Motion made by Mr. Clark, second by Mr. Nichols. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, eye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. It's 6:30. So we'll go ahead and open the meeting. Declare this meeting open. It's February 22nd, 6 p.m. on the dot, or 6:30 p.m. on the dot. Again, apologies. The agenda that was posted indicates 6, but the calendar itself indicates 6:30, so we're playing it safe. Before we go ahead and get started, I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the
So moved.
instructions.
Second. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing them, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, eye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
or City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Before we get going, I'd like it if possible, if you all could join me in a moment of silence for Steve Cannell. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it. Okay, first item of business. We have minutes, treasury, warrant, and payroll. Entertain a motion to approve the treasury warrant 21-W17 and payroll 21-PW17.
So moved.
Second, excluding any COA wages.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion about treasury warrant or payroll? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Aye.
Nichols,
Aye with exclusion.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Next, we'll entertain a motion for approval of meeting minutes from February 8th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, eye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Okay, next on the agenda, and I know we have some department heads here, so we'll try to get them in our order if we can. But first and foremost, we have a town administrator update. I think most importantly, we have a COVID-19 update for Ron to give. I know there's been a lot of information going back and forth. Your team's been working very hard with the state, everybody involved. So why don't you go ahead, Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a quick comment on the number of cases. We're down to about 40 cases, which is actually really good. We were up in the 90s, so the cases are starting to come down. That's great news. I think that's a result of a variety of things. First, we're through all the Christmas season, so people aren't getting together as much. But second, now that everybody's starting to get the vaccines, the 75 and older, and they actually they're starting the 65 and older now too. So that's real positive news. The more people get vaccinated, the more the cases should continue to drop. Before we get into the more pressing points of comments on COVID, I do want to briefly talk about the budget. The budget, I've had it ready now for a couple of days, all except for the school budget. Did talk to the superintendent of schools Friday. He said that Thursday, he said it would be ready probably on Friday for me. I emailed him this morning because I didn't have it yet. He said that Dan Didi was working on it today, and by the end of today, we would have it. I will admit, I read an article which I've sent to all of you that was very disappointing. And I'm hoping that when I actually see the budget numbers, that it doesn't look like the article. Because if it does look like the article, it will make me wonder why we even bother having a roundtable discussion, because it will serve that, if it's true, that article, it'll basically say that it's pointless to have those roundtable discussions because they clearly didn't listen to the views of any town administrator, town manager, board of selectmen member, or finance committee member that attended that meeting, because the number's higher than even last year's number, and last year's number was very high. So I'm not going to lie to you, I was disappointed. I'm hoping that I'll see something different when I see that number come in, but it's not something that it's not what I was hoping, at least from what I'm hearing so far. With that, I'm going to start the discussion on the COVID issue, but I'm going to leave it to my COVID experts that are on the line here, and I know a number of them are here. Rich, and I think Scott is here as well. As you know, we've all been kind of congratulating our healthcare workers, our health board, our health agent, our fire chief, the volunteers, and the firemen have been very involved in helping residents in terms of the vaccines. And we're pretty much through all the 75 pluses in town, and the first responders are all pretty much done. Right now, I believe that they're still doing a few 75 and olders in other towns, but we're opening up very shortly to the 65 plus. Now, one of the things that I'll say is because of the great job that Rutland has done, I think it's been recognized as a community that is really leading the efforts as it relates to the vaccines, and has gotten tremendous amounts of kudos from all over the place. So I'm very proud of our team. But as such, it looks like the state would like us to be a regional vaccine center. And what that means, I prefer to have our healthcare professionals explain that. I will say that there's been massive amounts of calls. I talked to Nancy Nichols at the Senior Center Community Center today. She told me she's inundated with calls of people just, wondering what's going on, what the process is. I do want to make it clear to everybody and anyone who's listening to this that the town has to follow the state process. We can't do anything on our own. We have to follow the different phases that are outlined by the governor. And we are subject to the amount of vaccines that we actually get. So we can't do things because we want to, because we think we should do something different. It's not an option for us. With that, I don't know if Rich, or frankly, I think probably Scott, if Scott's on, maybe Scott can make some comments, and Rich is here as well.
I see Seth and Scott are in the meeting. I think I do personally have some questions that I'd like to have cleared up. I'm not sure if Scott or Seth, which one of you wants to kind of spearhead the conversation.
God, we need to hear about the library plans and what the future is going to be, and then I think the selectmen will have a better understanding of what questions to ask. Scott?
He's on mute.
Richard, you want to take the
No,
lead?
sorry, my fault. I unmuted my laptop, not my actual Zoom. My fault. So, well, let's explain. Ron kind of did a great job. Let's explain why we're in the situation we're in, and then, we can explain everything else from there. So, as probably everybody's heard, the governor and the state decided that they were going to do away with all the small little town clinics, and they wanted to focus strictly on the mass sites and regional sites. With that being said, we were going along pretty nicely. We were taking care of our town as well as 12 or 13 other towns. We were supplying their product, the doses, and then they would themselves give the doses out in their towns at their own clinics. When that announcement came down, we were told, unfortunately, and by the state, that everything we were doing was going to go away. So we pretty much said, well, we don't want that. I mean, we don't want our citizens to have to worry about driving to Gillette, Fenway, wherever, and we said, what can we do? And the state came back and said, well, we really don't have a stronghold in Central Mass for a regional / hub. We've got Worcester State, which they don't know how much they're going to be able to do with because kids are in class right now. So they said, we will continue to allow you to do as you're doing for you and your 12, 13 other collaborative towns, just so long as at some point, you have to open up your clinics to You know, if you have
Housing paperwork.
you have to open up your clinics to the rest of the state too. So when somebody goes on one of the websites for the state, they punch in and they see Rutland's available, they can go there. And we said, fine, we're great with that. And that's kind of where we're at now. So we, instead of taking care of like a Barry or a New Braintree or Ocam and just getting the doses and then sending it to them, now, unfortunately, their folks, you know, their citizens have to come to us at the library, and then we're going to give them the doses ourselves. So that's probably going to be, as opposed to where we were taking care of ourselves and our own citizens, maybe a couple days a week. Now we're probably going to be 5 days a week, you know, close to 700 or 750 doses a week. At some point down the road, we'll ramp up to that. We'll be doing that for until pretty much everything's done with, you know, and the general pop is taken care of. So that's kind of why we're in this situation now. You know, we made the decision, you know, let's take on this giant beast, you know, and all the burdens that come with it, and do what's right for the best of our town citizens. You know, I mean, we don't need our citizens having to drive anywhere else. Let them come in there, you know, to the library and, you know, pretty much their own backyard, as opposed to going Fenway, Gillette, maybe Worcester State, maybe Springfield, maybe, you know, the Reggie Lewis Center, what have you. So that's where we decided we would take it into our own hands and take care of our town and do what we had to do to make sure that they had that easy outlet to get their doses.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments. We're looking at potentially up to 750 people a day coming into Rutland. That's the number. I think that at least this point, Scott, that's the top of the line number.
Is it per day or per week?
Per day.
Per day.
Per day.
Yeah.
So
And now,
we're thinking it's going to be a little over 500, but depending upon how many doses that they actually have ready for us, but so I guess the number is somewhere between 500 and 750 vaccinations a day is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, the 65 and olders, that opened up for sign up now. So those are going to start as well very shortly. I think they're expecting, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're expecting that 65 and older will be coming in March 4th and 5th. Am I correct?
yeah, so we're starting at March 4th and 5th, then we'll go into the week of March 8th, and then we'll go into the week of March 15th. And again, depending on how many doses the state sends us, we will do as many doses as the state sends us.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to comment, and this is kind of interesting. You know, I talk to these guys, the health people, pretty regular, but things are still changing very quickly, almost on a day-to-day basis. So I have to admit, I'm afraid to put anything out there publicly because I don't know what's going to kind of hold for more than a couple of days. I get citizens that are calling me, but they said before the community center is getting literally hundreds of calls from people. So we are trying to put out the information to people as best we can, but we're also being a little cautious. And I would say to anything, even though we tell you something, I would always put the caveat on unless the state changes it, because what we hear one day and what we tell you can change pretty rapidly depending upon what happens at the governor's level. So I just want to kind of throw that caution out there, because I know frankly things probably better than most, and I find myself day to day coming up with new questions and new comments from citizens that I just can't answer.
So is it, if we can, I'd like to kind of open this up for a board discussion, because I know there's probably some questions. Scott and Seth, do you mind if I ask you some questions about kind of the process, just to clear up some information? We've had a lot, particularly over the weekend. You know, as you know, we have a lot of active community groups on social media. There's been some information that's gone out that probably hasn't been accurate. So I'd like to be able to clear up for the public that's watching kind of what the current plan is. Is that all right with you all?
Oh yeah, sure.
Scott, can I answer it?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, Seth, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead with this.
Okay.
Basically, how this process is going to entail, starting the week of March 8th, vaccine dependent, obviously, if we get vaccine. The plan is to do 360 first dose vaccines a day, Monday through Friday at the library for the first 3 weeks. On week 4, we will continue doing 368-day first doses, but that will also ramp us up into the 700 range because we now have to give second doses at that same volume. So that will give us around 720. The goal is to be outside and out of the library by early to mid-April, weather dependent. We do have outside tents that we can do drive-through clinics, and then our volume will be able to go up higher from that. We're probably looking at maybe 4 to 6 weeks, depending on weather, in the basement of the library as a walk-in flu clinic style to get us through this weather pattern until the warmer weather comes.
Okay, and I just have do you mind if I ask you just a couple more pointed questions just to clear up some information? So the fear that has been put out that I'd like us to respond to if we can is just to ask, I mean, will Rutland residents that want vaccines in Rutland be able to get them in Rutland?
Yes, so what we've done is we've set up a process that will allow our own citizens in the 12-member towns to basically have first bite at the apple to start scheduling. On the Sunday of the week of any clinics, it will be posted on the Mass map where any open slots will be able to be filled by any resident in the Commonwealth. So basically, everyone will get a week's notice to get your community residents in. And then going forward from that, if there are any open spots, then it'll be opened up to the general population.
Okay. So I know that we had talked a little bit last week. There's folks that using the state site appear to be potentially signing up for phases that they might not necessarily be eligible for by accident. Is there a process that you're using to mitigate that, to make sure that that does not happen?
We ran into that situation today. We had over 200 people sign up for the 75 and over clinic that are happening this week. We basically had to go through the whole process and try to weed out some of the ones that didn't qualify and reschedule them in next week's 65 and over plus 2 comorbidities to try to get them into the right spots. Unfortunately, the state website is very cumbersome. Well, it is difficult to use, but there's a drop-down menu that you can pick any one of them. It will let you continue to register regardless. It will not disqualify you due to age or anything else. The state has not done a great job as far as setting up that site. So we're trying to deal with that on a daily basis as we look at the people that are registered and to double verify that, you know, they are who they say they are and they meet the requirements set forth by the governor.
Okay, and I guess just lastly, so we're going to be providing these additional vaccines on a daily basis. But your team's already stretched pretty thin in terms of the workload you're doing. Is DPH or anybody providing additional support to help us with those additional vaccines?
So basically what we have is we have the Wachusett Regional Emergency Response Corps. It's a group of nurses and volunteers. I think there's already over 80 volunteers in that group that are committed to our center because the towns we serve and the towns they're from. So we have a very large resource of volunteer staff that will help that. Basically, the fire department in all 12 towns will be responsible for any resident that is shut in and can't get to a clinic. We will take their names and address, get them registered, and we will actually go to their homes and vaccinate them in their homes. So each town is committed to take on that responsibility for their own communities and their own citizens. As before, we will provide the vaccine to those towns and they will go to the people's homes to take care of that. So that's pretty much how we've been rolling this out. Other than, you know, the day-to-day support staff, just keeping the logistics going, behind the scenes stuff, going. So every morning when we start out, there's no waiting. We hit the ball rolling and we get it done. The maximum we've done in one day is 300 with no problem, with a lot of downtime. So we're very comfortable that we can hit that 700 with no problem. Just to give you a perspective, in the last 5.5 weeks, As of this coming Friday, we'll have given out over 7,000 doses in our collaborative. So that's a huge, huge number for us. And we're pretty proud of that and to achieve that for such a small town.
Okay, and just my last question, I want to open up to the board because I know I saw Leah's hand up too.
Hey, Mitch, I just want to throw into what Seth just said. And I guess the good or the bad thing about everybody now coming to Rutland versus the other towns is all those nurses in that group that Seth was talking about were also covering all the other towns' clinics. So now we have the full 80 plus people from that group only coming here. They're not.
You kind of consolidated the manpower is what you're.
Yep, exactly. So, and we never were at a manpower issue. We don't think, you know, like as Seth said, we easily did 300 and could have done more.
Okay. And just to potentially tamp down, I think, you know, fears or politicization of kind of the vaccines. I mean, can you provide us with a reason why you believe the state, it's my understanding the state moved to this regional model because there's some ongoing issues with federal funding. Is that your impression as well? Or is there another reason why this was regionalized in the way that it was?
You know, I don't know if we've ever gotten the true answer. My belief is that unfortunately, the state of Massachusetts has only been getting the same amount of doses for the past 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks. It's never grown, you know, even, you know, everything's going up. You hear out there the federal government's getting more. We've always gotten the same amount. And then because of that, they obviously can only dole out that amount. And because they've been putting online these mass sites, and these mass sites have been promising these huge numbers, I think the state's kind of gotten into a conundrum where they're trying to feed these mass sites to get the numbers up high quickly, not realizing in doing that they're shorting some of the smaller towns or just not being able to fill it all. And they didn't want to do that either and get the bad press. So I think they finally said, well, let's only do big groups, big collaboratives, so we have less groups to have to send to, first of all. And as we're sending to them, they'll be doling out bigger numbers. I mean, as everybody remembers, just a couple of weeks ago, Massachusetts was maybe 42nd in the whole country for a number of doses given. You know, it's since jumped up huge because they've been doing the mass sites, and they're now consolidating where they can kind of take care of these other sites that are just big number sites, as opposed to a Rutland that might only have 75 people in one day, you know?
Yeah. Okay. I guess then that aside, I want to open it up first. I mean, look, there have been a lot of smaller towns and communities that have not been as effective in distribution. And so I think it's a testament kind of to the work, Scott, that you and your team have done, and Seth, that you and your team have done. And Ron, same thing, everybody involved to really be kind of that one of the leaders in Central Mass. So it is, I think, a reflection on the work that we've done as a community that we have this opportunity to kind of make sure that Central Massachusetts is being provided the same services that we've been providing our residents. So kudos to everybody involved. Did anybody from the board have any questions about the COVID-19 update or the process moving forward? Leah, I saw your hand up, and I see Jeff, you have your hand up as well. So Leah, if you want to go, then Jeff, and then Lyndon.
Thank you, Mitch. As far as staffing concerns, I know that UMass has created a vaccine corps also, so I can send that contact info along. It's a statewide resource for the entire state for people that want to volunteer at different clinics, but also for sites that need volunteers. They have that access also. So I'll pass that along to Seth and Scott and Lynn. And then
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I had first I wanted to thank all of the team for doing this. I think it's a huge service to the town and to our residents to keep this going and offer the opportunity in town for these vaccinations. I assume everything has been worked out with the library, that you know, it sounds like the staffing side, the vaccine staffing side and everything is okay. Is the, and is Carrie, I assume, okay with using the library, but I just wanted to confirm that there's been communications with building use and everything also.
Yes, we reached out to Kerry before we even, went forward. We said, hey, are you okay with this? This is what it's going to entail. This is what it's going to be like. This is the length we're thinking. And she was fine.
Thank you. Those were my big things. And I just, again, want to say thank you. And if there's anything for myself, and I would hope as a board, we can come to the, in agreement that if there's anything we as a board can do to support you, that we're here for that.
Absolutely. Well put, Leah. Jeff, and then Ron, you had your hand up too. But Jeff, Lyndon, and then Ron.
Thank you. What a credit to the town of Rutland, and as a result of the hard work of Scott Gilroy and Seth Knight and Rich Stevens and his team to be recognized to spearhead the Central Mass initiative in there. That goes to their credit. Can't express enough appreciation for what you guys have done. It's excellent. So my question is what is going to be the primary method for the Rutland residents to sign up when their phase comes about? Is it going to be through the Mass site, or are we still using a bit of the phone tree downstairs, or what's the answer that we can put out?
Jeff, to answer that, unfortunately, everything we do is going to bring us back to the Mass site. Oh, I got another call.
You know what?
Go ahead, Scott.
I would say, so basically, we have the ability to set up a link that we will be able to share with our town folks in our town, and then the other towns, like the Board of Health, or their, as it is right now, their senior centers. And that link is, we call it private, but it's just a link that doesn't open up the site to everybody, to the state. It just opens up to those 12, 13 towns that are in our collaborative, to allow them to use that link. And then, as Seth said, the Sunday, March 1st, so Sunday, February 28th, Monday, March 1st at midnight, that link then goes live on the state site. So then everybody in the state can now see that link for those clinics, and then they can then get in and, sign up if they want to.
People will be referred to the state site to begin the sign-up process.
Yeah. So,
Organization site.
Yeah.
Is there something that we can put out perhaps as a town? Because I know we've been hesitant and we've been cautious on putting something out for social media because of the changing nature of the information. But I'm wary, because if each individual member puts things out and we don't put it out accurately, it just fuels into some of the misinformation that's been flying around on social media already. So maybe, Ron, if you can work with Scott and Seth, if they think it's appropriate to draft something brief that maybe as a board we could put out to make sure it's accurate, I think that might be better than.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to do that. We can post it on the town website, the Facebook pages for both the town and my Facebook page. I added one thing a ways back, and I got all kinds of people comment about it. So, and I had worked it out with both Scott and Rich before I moved forward with it. But we can do that and at least get something out there for people to see on those sites. And I will have them draft it and give it to me, and we'll make sure that both Anita and I post it so that it's accurate. And we'll put a disclaimer on there that the state changes something, we'll have to change with it. But at least, I must admit that people won't see that. Even we put it in big bold letters, they seem to kind of ignore those caveats. But we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, I think we should certainly try. Lyndon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions.
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. First, I just want to.
I think if you have your mic, if your mic is on the laptop and on your headphones, it might be creating that feedback. So you're on mute, Lyndon. Lyndon, you're still on mute.
I know. Hey there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't hear you guys.
That's better, Lyndon.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? 'Cause I can't hear you. You can move on.
Lyndon, we'll come back to you in just a second. Do you want to use the chat feature as well? It's at the bottom of the screen. Jeff, you had your hand up?
Yeah, real quick, when the state was in communication with you about offering the opportunity here, was any discussion of additional funding outside of the CARES Act that might be allotted to Rutland for the resources, specifically the fire department and Board of Health people who are normally part-time, going full-time?
I can answer that. I sat through a FEMA conference call a couple of weeks ago. The federal government is going to pay 100% the cost of all vaccine-related costs due to clinics from now through September of 2021. So all related costs directly to the clinics will be 100% FEMA reimbursed. There are some exceptions that are not covered as far as ancillary supplies, IV needle sets and stuff like that, that will be covered by CARES. But all labor costs, any major equipment or anything that needs to be purchased, like the freezer, that will all be 100% paid for by FEMA.
Any further questions about this before we move on?
Lyndon's trying, so let's let Lyndon.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Nancy was logged in and that's what was causing the back. So I just want to obviously kudos to the team and what they've done. I've obviously seen it with Nancy being on the phone continuously with staff and customers and stuff. I just want to go back a little bit on the history because I was a little surprised because I learned about it from social media that we were actually doing this. So I'd kind of like to know when the state asked us, when Ron was made aware of it, when the board was made aware of it, and when the decision was made. Because I do have a couple of concerns, and I certainly am not going to be against doing the clinic, but Ron had mentioned that we went from 90 cases down to 40, and now we're going to be looking at, if we get up to the average that the state was requesting, 3,750 people in town weekly. So that's obviously going to have somewhat of an impact on the community. So I want to know how that was addressed, and if the police chief was part of the discussions, because it would have an impact on him as well as the use of the library. I know that our board had been trying to have meetings in the library, and we've been unable to. So I do have concerns bringing thousands of people through the building and how that's all being addressed. So I just wanted a little bit more background and a little bit more of what the plans going forward are.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'll start, but I may need a little bit of help from Scott as well. So the first thing I will say to you, Lyndon, is that when I was notified of the library use, I immediately sent out an email. Actually, I think I talked to the chairman first, and then I sent out an email to all the board members letting them know the library was considered. I think that was like on a Friday when me and you went back and forth on emails. I think it was Sterling that, in the preliminary stages as it was being discussed, I think they knew about the discussion more before I even knew about it, and they did something on Facebook about that and kind of jumped the gun on that announcement. I don't think it was completely finalized at that point. In terms of the library, one of the issues that I had, and the chair actually talked about going back to regular meetings. Now the cases are getting lower, the buildings are open again. The chairman asked me about having regular select board meetings again at the library and letting people Zoom in from outside. I asked people at the library about that and the cable guys if we could do that again. The director of the library reached out to the board of trustees, and they had significant concerns about having meetings on the downstairs level with all the people coming in and out for vaccinations. And frankly, one of the issues was the safety of members of various committees going downstairs with the number of people that would be going through that building on the downstairs. So I was, one of the things I was waiting for to respond to Leah's question was that was a discussion among the library board of trustees and the library director, who all came out against having meetings again downstairs while we're doing those vaccinations. Now, as they try to point out, they're eventually, when the weather gets warmer, they want to take those outside. When they do, I think then we can start up the regular meetings again downstairs. I'm also concerned about the impact on the library upstairs. Now, from my point of view, that the upstairs shouldn't be affected. We can gate it downstairs and people should be able to go up and use the upstairs for browsing like they had done. I talked to the director. They're not quite ready to do that. It is an open discussion among her and the library board as to when they would open for browsing again. I think that should happen relatively soon. And I think there's a distinction between the upstairs and the downstairs, but that is something being considered by the library board or trustees and the library director at this time. The details as to what happened, that Sterling got the info, I think Scott needs to, Scott or Rich need to address how they got to find out, because that was kind of before I got involved.
Yeah, and if I could just hop into Rob before we put it on Scott and Seth, Linda, to answer your question too. I know the situation's been fluid, and kind of given what was going on social media with Sterling, and then other folks posting on community boards. I think it would have been premature prior to tonight's conversation, without having the full details fleshed out, to really put anything out, because it's my understanding that the situation has been kind of fluid to lock this down. So I think, based on what I'm hearing tonight, and really based on what I heard at the end of last week, and I know I had talked to you, Seth, briefly about some concerns, it sounds like really this is the soonest that the board in its entirety would have been able to have been definitively briefed on the plan as it was occurring, just because of the changing nature of what's been going on at DPH. Is that fair, Scott and Seth?
Exactly. Basically, Jana from DPH came to us, and forgive me for the dates, these past couple weeks and months have gone by like crazy. Let's say it was a Tuesday. They came to us and said, hey, this is the situation. I think later Monday night is when maybe the governor had made the announcement that they were going to close down all the smaller towns and all that. So we talked to Jana, and she said, hey, this is what you can do. And pretty basically that night, when we were discussing it, we let Ron know that we were planning on doing this. And then, like you said, unfortunately, you guys weren't together till tonight to really talk to you about it. And the state pretty much just said, you got to let us know as soon as you can, because, we'll move on to the next option. And, that option, again, could have been Athol, Orange, and then now the Rutland residents are traveling there. So we, first thing we thought about is making it easiest for the town residents. So that's what we did. And, we acted as quick as we had to act.
Okay, Lyndon, does that answer your question?
Maybe not really, and it also didn't address whether Chief Monaco was involved in the discussion, and he's aware of the increase in the impact on the community.
Yeah. He's all completely aware. Sorry about that. I thought we were just kind of still on that one piece, but yes, he's aware. We've made him aware. He knows. We've talked to Joe at DPW. He's aware. We've made everybody aware to be ready for this.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Bill, I see your hand up, and if there's no other questions from the board, I will open the floor to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Brazo. I'm a member of the board, Library Board of Trustees. First, I'd like to say I applaud the entire team's efforts. You guys have been doing a great job. Yeah, I am completely in favor of using the library, offering the library once again to benefit the town and the communities surrounding the town. I do have a few concerns. One is, we're going to be ramping this up to the point of having 4,000 people a week coming through the library, cleaning the cleaning of the library every day, sanitizing was one of my concerns. And Is there anything in place to guarantee that the library will stay cleaned after each use?
Yes, we've already talked to Carrie. You know, she'll have our schedule every week. She'll know when the clinics start. She'll know when the clinics end. You know, we're gonna have the rooms cleaned. You know, before and after. Again, that'll all be covered by FEMA monies. We're looking to possibly do. Either a spray or wipes or something during the day, so we can get surfaces that are touched a lot, whether a chair or a table or a handrail or something. We're gonna look at that. We always have the dispensaries right at the entrance and at the exit, so folks are coming in and cleaning their hands immediately. But we've already talked to Carrie about it. She's aware, and she's gonna schedule accordingly, and know that we're gonna make sure that is our number one goal, that those 2 rooms or 3 rooms, if you want to consider the little foyer there, are going to be constantly cleaned and perfectly cleaned, and from the one day to the next.
That sounds great. Will there be any security there during the day while they're administering the vaccines?
We don't think we need it. We've been doing this all along so far. I mean, I guess it's one of those things you feel it out. If as we increase the amount of people, and we think there's a need because people are getting unruly or lines are getting too long, then we will address that. But we've had really no issues. So I think as of right now we're good, but we will always bring some police help in if we need it.
Great. Those are my concerns. I'm happy we can be of service to the town and the community. So
Mr.
that's
Chair.
it for me. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you,
can I
Bill.
just
Go
comment?
ahead.
Just a comment, Bill. Now I've had a lot of discussions with the police chief about this particular issue, the security of that building. We had one potential kind of incident where somebody was a little obnoxious. They wanted to get their shot and couldn't. But the police department has been informed, and the chief has assured me if there's any issues that the staff over there can call them immediately and they'll respond very quickly to it. So they're aware of it. And if I see any significant problems, I'm going to call them in, because we just cannot deal with people. And truthfully, there are some people who are very emotional about this issue, and they can be a little bit obnoxious. So I don't want to put any of my staff or any of the volunteers in danger. So we'll respond quickly if there's any security issues at all.
And I know too,
Thank
to the point as well, Ron, we got kind of a little more than a week or so to figure this out. And I know that you're going to be having these conversations with Seth and with Nick to make sure that we're covered on that end. So great. Jean, I see you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm also on the Library Board of Trustees. Just to piggyback on Bill's question, you addressed security. What are their thoughts on parking and traffic for getting in and out of the library and that?
So we looked at the numbers, and with the timing of how we turn over, the citizens, the patients to get their vaccination, and then there's usually a 15 to 30 minute wait to check for any type of reactions. We figured it out that with what we have between the 2 lots, the existing lot and then the new lot next door, we should have no issue of any type of parking issues. As far as traffic, we have a whole bunch of volunteers, and we did have volunteers when we did it before, and there are people directing cars all over the place. If somebody needs a nurse to come out to a car because they can't get out of their car for vaccination, we were doing that. They would put them to the side. So we've got I think we had at one point, we might have had 2 or 3 people just out directing people the whole time. So we've yet to have any issue. And actually, I want to say one of our first days where we had the biggest numbers was right after we had one of those big storms. So not only was DPW unbelievable at cleaning both lots and getting the walks clean, we had obviously had bigger piles of snow throughout the parking lot, and we still had no issue with parking.
Oh, just to follow up on that, with the number of hours that we're working, we're only looking at approximately 40 to 45 cars an hour in the parking lot.
So, I mean, I would imagine, Seth, that that's probably, for those of you that are watching that vote at the library, we had a huge turnout, a couple months ago now. And parking was plentiful. It seemed like the flow was pretty good in and out. It sounds like that hourly limit's going to be similar to kind of an election day. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that would be correct. We're basically planning the length of our clinics based around on flow patterns. The road is a one-way road in and out, so the traffic flow should be pretty steady, but pretty easily to follow and manage. They're exiting out onto Main Street over by Naquag, so it should be pretty easy to get in and out with no problems.
Okay. Yeah, that helps. And then also, I don't know if it was clarified or not, what the hours of the clinic are going to be. I know you were talking about 5 days a week. Do you know what the hours of the day it would be, or they're not sure yet?
Currently, right now, starting tomorrow, the clinic for tomorrow is scheduled from 9 a.m. to 5, so 9 to 5. And that will pretty much be consistent throughout the whole process. Once we get to this the 700 range, we'll probably go to a 10-hour day. We'll probably go from 8 to 6.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from the Board of Selectmen? Or I know we have how many members of the library board are here? I know Tressa, you had your hand up as well.
I count, there's Ruth, Tressa, Kathy, Bill, me. Is that 5 of us here?
Okay. I think questions are okay, but let's just make sure we ask questions and not deliberate, because we don't want to create an inadvertent quorum amongst the board members. So I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we did not know ahead of time that you were going to be coming as a board to this meeting. So again, I would just ask you, if you have questions, just stay away from deliberating points. I guess Tressa and then Ruth.
Hi, this is Tressa. I'm actually going to defer to Ruth. Ruth, go ahead, please. Thanks.
Ruth, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. No, we're just wanted to be available if there were questions, and we wanted to be able to articulate our support for this. And if there were questions from the board about the select board, we wanted to be available. So that's all. I think Jean and Bill raised up any questions we had regarding security or, cleaning, and we're fine.
Okay, great. Are there any more questions? All right, Tressa, you had your hand up.
Hi, sorry. Yep, I have one more question. So you mentioned the FEMA money and the CARES Act. We have been told that some of the furnaces are no longer operational and have failed in the library. Would money possibly be allotted for those type of repairs?
You may have been reading my mind, because I was going to bring that up. Yes, because it is a COVID vaccination site. Yes, there is that ability, and we are already in the process. Kerry's all over it. Seth is all over it. So we are already in the process.
Great.
Okay, so maybe that's something that you can put on the agenda for the next library board meeting. I would encourage you to bring it to CIPC, because it is a capital expense, and it's something that I know that board was also looking at closely and worked with Kerry and Joe Buckley on what those needs were. So I think that they'd like to be brought up to speed on that. And I know Kerry's been very good about getting that board information. So, all right, thank you all. If there's no other questions, I'm going to move back into kind of the regular agenda here. I want to thank Ron and Seth and Scott and Rich, obviously, for not just the update, but I know in these positions, Scott, you've got a full-time job too. So I know you've been working plenty of overtime hours, so we appreciate that. And Leah, you have your hand up before we move on to public comment.
Thank you. Sorry. I just, I'm not sure if this is the right place to bring it up, but would it be beneficial, Seth and Rich and Scott, if the board's amenable to working with all the 12, 16 member towns and drafting a letter of support behind this, and really kind of to keep it in the forefront for the state to know that we're serious about this and that we should continue to get our vaccine allotments here, and that it's a service that we're providing to quite a large region. I just feel like it can easily fall off the radar at the state level, and I don't want that to happen, I guess. So I think
what are
more.
your fears? Because I've seen that same post on WatchuChat. What are your same fears about this falling off at the state level? Because it sounds like we are on the forefront of offering this as a service to the Central Mass communities.
Right, and I think that that's important, and I just have seen firsthand that the hospitals are no longer, and doctors' offices are no longer currently able to obtain vaccines, and that's supposed to be temporary, and hopefully that's the case. But I don't want, if there becomes a vaccine supply issue, I don't necessarily want it to just end up at the three big sites or whatever. I want to make sure that it's known that we feel as a regional community very strongly that we're providing a very important service to our community members. And so that's my thinking. I don't know what post you're talking about on WatchuChat. But yeah.
Can I answer that, Mitch?
Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, so really to answer the big concern is, as you're looking at all these large mass vaccination sites, they don't have the storage capacity to store Pfizer. They've been getting the Moderna directly, which can be stored at refrigerated temperature. Because we started planning for this late summer, we planned ahead. We are the only municipality in the Commonwealth that has a freezer to store Pfizer. Everything else is commercially based, hospital-based facilities. That's why we've been able to stay open and get the vaccine that we've been getting, is because of our storage capabilities. And we're able to store large quantities once they start ramping up. So I think that's a huge benefit. I know all the member towns that we've been dealing with have been working very closely with their state senators and representatives to really push the issue and drive the issue with DPH that, you know, this is a valuable asset that we're providing to our communities. So I think we're doing our job as far as keeping, you know, our state reps involved, and they've been doing the heavy lifting for us as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to that point, and, you know, again, I'm more than willing if we want a motion to support the effort that our team is putting forward. But in terms of advocating with the state, I've been on some of those calls. You know, Senator Goby and Rep. Ferguson have been extremely hardworking and strong advocates for Rutland and for Central Massachusetts in general when it comes to vaccine distribution. And again, I think, you know, what we've done is we put in place a system, or not, I mean, Seth and Scott and Rich, to where we're kind of the most logical choice. So I think that we've all been advocating for it, you know, everybody on the team every day. If we, again, want to make it more official, I think we can look to do that, but it's not something we have not been doing to this point. Jeff, go ahead.
It sounds to me like the state is waiting on an answer from the town on our position, and apparently, you know, the board does support this initiative. So I would support some sort of a motion to say that Rutland supports being spearheading the 12-town hub as a COVID vaccination site. I think that would help them when they have to respond to the state.
All right, so I think, you know, I'll go ahead then and make a motion that we support the ongoing efforts of our team to advocate for Rutland in being a Central Mass distribution hub and working closely with the state. And if we can leave that motion at that, I think that probably does. All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
for discussion, Mitch.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
We just double circle back with the fire chief and board of health to make sure this is going to suit their needs. If there's anything else that they would like,
Oh, absolutely. I
town's
mean,
business, just to make sure we do it right.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if there's something else they need, but again, I think everybody's been working every day with DPH on this, and hopefully this is something that, again, everything changes and it's fluid, but it looks like there's a plan in place. All right.
Does that motion work for them? Rich, does that work for them?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, if you could throw in a 3-month vacation for the three of us in Aruba when this is all over, I mean, I'm not going to argue on that piece either.
Yeah, the board also.
Are you talking about Aruba, Rhode Island, Scott? Or...
Yeah.
Anywhere.
All right. No, I think that's great. So again, great job, everyone involved. I'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
City, aye, and motion carries unanimous. Again, if Seth, Scott, your team needs anything, come back. The board will support you in any way we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
All right. So going back to the order of the agenda, took that out of order. We have public comment. Is there anyone in the public for public comment? If you are, please raise your hand in the Zoom chat feature. Go ahead, Ron.
Well, we got to do item C under town administrator's update quickly. We kind of skipped past item C under town administrator's update.
Okay, do we want to go back to that after public comment? You can finish up.
Yeah, just if we could just finish up this thing and take it 2 minutes.
All right, just go ahead, finish up.
If you could. So just to let people know, right, I did talk to Bonnie Bessie of the 300th year anniversary committee. That group has not met as of yet. So we do need to get that fired up. I suggest a couple of things for the board to consider is either adding more members to this committee to kind of get it juiced up, or trying to figure out if we can somehow combine it with the 4th of July committee, because I think the timing of it fits well to that 4th of July committee. But I just want the board to keep that in mind, because I don't want this to fall aside. So just, we can discuss this more at the next meeting, but I think we do have to take some action and move it forward. In my final comment, I want to first of all, thank the Board of Selectmen. You guys have been really courteous in thanking the whole team of people who've been working on this COVID-19, but we couldn't have done it without the support of the Board of Selectmen. Every step of this way through this process, you guys have been awesome and supportive. So I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for their efforts in making this real. It really shows, in my opinion, it shows great leadership that you guys have been able to come out in front of this and take leadership of this. So all of the staff appreciate your support in this as well. It's not an easy task, and without you guys, we couldn't do it. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Before we go to public comment, Jeff and Leah, I think you both had your hands up. Jeff, then Leah.
I was just going to recognize, it appears that we have the building inspector and the chairman of the historical commission online here, if we could accommodate them.
Yep, we're going to do public comment first, and then we'll skip back around to those items. Leah, go ahead.
To touch base on the 300th anniversary committee, is it possible to put another call out? I think that committee was formed with no cap number of individuals, that it's kind of an open-ended, as many people that want to work on the committee can. I wonder if we can reach out to the 4th of July committee also. I hate to just assume that because they're on the 4th of July that they want to do or have the capacity to do the 300th, but I think if we can get on the website and everything, kind of a call out for more members for the 300th, that we need to get this going. It's coming up, that kind of thing, and see if we get any interest or push, or maybe the 4th of July committee is interested in it. And I just don't want to assume things, but I would like to try to make it known that we're still looking to get this going.
And I'd be happy to do both of those things, Leah.
It's a great idea.
Thank you.
All right, so going back to the order again, real quick, public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? If you are, please raise your hand in the Zoom chat feature. If not, I've had one request for public comment. Peter Crane, if you want to take a minute.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm going to send an email. This meeting is going to go long enough without my input tonight. So I'll send an email to Ron about it, and we can discuss whatever we need to discuss whenever. I don't know if it's the next meeting or whatever, but it's not important enough to bother the whole town right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. All right, so moving on, we had our town administrator update. We have old business. So I know that we have folks here, to Jeff's point. We'll start first with the Historical Commission, item number 89. As you recall, this is a carryover from the last meeting. We had 2 candidates that provided application materials. Not every board member got the chance to review all the materials from all the applicants. Both very qualified, very interested in serving. And we have, I believe, the chair of the Historical Commission here tonight. So I guess I will go ahead and entertain a motion from the board if they want to make an appointment, if it is in line from a recommendation from Peter. Jeff, you have your hand up.
I respectfully abstain as a member of the Historical Commission, but I just want to say publicly, I fully endorse and support both of the candidates, and they are welcomed asset to the Historical Commission, which is up and running and doing a great job.
Okay. Did anyone have Leah? Go ahead.
Thanks. The email from Anita said that we can appoint, that there's actually 2 vacancies on the commission and that we can appoint. So I just wanted to confirm that. And then separately, she had suggested that we consider putting to town meeting if we want to up that number to 7, because I know 6 makes an odd number. If it's a contentious item or something, you can have 3-3 split votes and everything. But I think that's a town meeting action, so it's something I would like to consider, but I just wanted to confirm that we have the 2 openings. So, and I know Peter's here, so I think he verbally had supported both of those candidates, but I wanted to confirm also with him.
Great. I mean, if that's the case, then I'll go ahead and make the motion to appoint both Sheila Junkins as well as Christine Drolet to the Historical Commission.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Peter, would you like to weigh in before we make the appointment?
Sure, yes, I support both candidates.
Great. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Jeff, you
Respectfully recuse.
understood. Nichols?
Nichols, aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Whitman?
Whitman, aye.
Resity, aye. Motion carries 4 yeas, 1 abstention. Thank you, Peter, for your patience and for your recommendation. We certainly appreciate it. And thank the 2 members for interest in serving. Great. Okay, moving on to new business. If we want to take an item out of order for our building inspector, I know he's on the line. I believe he is here to discuss item number 102, inspection fees. Before we get into what this item is, just as an overview for the Board of Selectmen. I believe that this is to discuss building fees, which I think in town it's been drawn to our attention that they're antiquated. They're disproportionately low. As you may know, most of these building and inspection fees cover the cost to conduct the inspections. So personnel, support staff, those kinds of things. Town's not raking in a bunch of money on these, but we're certainly want to break even. So to that, Ron, I guess I'll give it to you for your staff if you want to cede it over to the building inspector.
Thank you, and I appreciate it very much. So one of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to make sure that our fees were in line with what other towns are doing. So I asked the building official to review with each of his electrical, plumbing, gas inspectors to go through their fees, tell me what their recommendations would be if the fees were appropriate where they were at, if they should be higher or lower. And then also on the basis of, in order to give us a good basis for that, review what's happening in nearby towns to see if we're consistent with other towns are doing. We don't want to be higher than other towns. We don't want to be lower. Kind of want to be in that average. So each one of the 4 inspectors got together and went through each of the fees under their area of expertise, and they recommend these. You'll see a lot of these are blank. That means that they're happy with the current fee. You'll see the appropriate recommendations where they are. With that, I'll turn it over to our building official to kind of go through it a little bit more, but you should all have a chart that defines each of the areas. And again, only those where there's a recommended fee are the changes. Otherwise, everything stays the same. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to David.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I had asked Jim Smith, first the plumbing and gas inspector, and he had actually no suggestions on changes to be made. I had asked Lester Grace. He had asked that only about a few changes made in commercial only on the electrical fees. In the building, I had commented that some of the fees were somewhat low, and Ron had asked me to look into that. And I did take the towns that actually touch the borders of Rutland. I tried to evaluate and get an average of what the fees were for the comparable items that were listed on the Rutland list. Every town, again, has its own unique formulas to come up with, especially the new house structure for fees. I basically concentrated, as you can see in the paperwork, that a 2,500 square foot house I wanted an average, otherwise it was a mathematical nightmare. And you can see the list of variations that are down there at the very bottom. Rutland basically does have the lowest new house fees. Paxton seems to mirror Rutland. All the other towns are somewhat higher. The new house fees, they are double, but I mean, I would leave that to the selectmen. I would just say a modest fee at this point in time might be, warranted, maybe a 25 or 50 to bring it up in line with more comparable fees. And mostly everything else is just to be bumped up slightly to the recommended fee. And you can see the listed averages fees, and that is very comparable to cover, the inspection, the paperwork, just as Mitch had mentioned earlier, which is what I had in mind, just to cover the services and be a fair cost for both the customer and fair dealing for the town itself to cover those costs. But in no way does it actually fund the building department. These are just fees for services.
Yeah.
And I guess it's self-explanatory as it is there.
Okay.
That's about all I have to say.
I think what we're looking for, and Ron, is this the process? If we wanted to update our fee structure, we can do it through a vote tonight to do so. I think if the board is amenable, what I'm going to recommend, and the board can do it whichever way it likes, but what seems to be easier would be to take them as a slate, with the exception of, I think, the new construction fee, because that, I think David suggested increasing that a certain percentage versus a recommended fee flat rate, if you're looking at the chart. Does that make sense?
Well, it would be a percentage of what Rutland has now, because it technically is based on the overall area average is virtually, the average is double or more than double what Rutland has now. But I think staying in a fair arena with the contractor that actually just works solely in Rutland, not to, to take a better look at it, the selectmen should vote on that.
Jeff, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to query building inspector and Ron. On the bottom of the notes, it said a 50% to 25% minimum increase is suggested. What's the recommendation of?
Well, my recommendation is, like I had just mentioned, is like, I'm just more concerned with, such a bump up in price. Again, the decision would be like the selectmen, but my concern is through the contractors who solely just work in Rutland. I impose such a burden, but it should be looked at closer and justified.
What's your recommendation? Anywhere
between those two.
So
only,
the list you have here for your current fees and recommended fees, the blank spaces are obviously for areas for which some of your inspectors did not deem any sort of raise necessary. And then you have recommended fees that are next to some line items. Is the overall, are you just looking for the increases in those areas that are recommended?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
The only question, David, he's trying to get to, you know, all the amounts recommended are the fees we're looking to increase those. But the question, David, you're being specifically asked, I think, if I'm understanding the chair correctly, was under new residential dwellings from 2001 to 2,500 square feet, you put C notes. And then when you go to the notes, it says, I guess, a 50 to 25% number. So what number for the 2001 to 2,500 square feet, what number do you want to recommend for that one fee so that they can lock it down?
I would say a 50% would be more in line with the surrounding towns.
50% of the what? 50% increase? So
Of
you're
the 687.
50% of Rutland's already scheduled fee rate.
So it's 687.50. You're saying half of that should be added to the 687.50?
That would bring it up to 9 something. It's still under the 13 something average.
What is the formula that we use to calculate the actual fee for new construction homes?
That is, every town is different. And since I only got into this 2 weeks ago, I had asked Ron this morning, I do not know what formula or how these numbers were derived at. Each town is so different. It took days actually to try to calculate an average between some of these towns. Some are based on percentage, 007, square foot, percentage of things. It was just quite different.
Okay, I think in order to recommend an increase in that number, I would like to see what the formula is that goes into that.
It would take research. Yeah, it would have to be researched.
Yeah, I personally am for bringing our fees in line with the surrounding communities because it does go back to support town services. So I just think that I would want a little bit more information as to that formula. Because I think the way you've laid out the rest of the fees with your inspectors and the suggested increases is excellent. It's just that percentage number that I'm a little bit confused about. Does that make sense?
Yes, the percentage is based on just where Rutland stands now and what all the other towns are doing. How Rutland came to those fee schedules right today, the fees are unknown, just like the other towns. I only went back and saw some of the older Rutland fees, but there was nothing detailing how anything was derived.
I think what Mr. Chairman, what he's trying to do here, because he couldn't find the formula, to just make some compromise between the 687.50 and the 1382. And then, you know, he was looking at taking 50% of the 687.50, adding it to it. And that puts you in the middle so that you're not too high, you're not too low. And he's believing that that's a reasonable number.
I guess how are we going to though? How are we going to raise it 25% without knowing the individual factors that contribute to that cost? I mean, is it just going to be you just plug in an extra 25% and that's kind of what it spits out when you pull that permit?
The numbers are just based on what we're looking at around us. I think to look at what came up, like you said, whatever the numbers were that created the Rutland fee schedule should be looked at if you want to use that as a basis to come to a figure that is maybe consistent with today. I don't know what that formula was that created that, if there was one.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you. This is more just maybe me thinking out loud, but I think it's potentially twofold, right? We are looking currently at a fee schedule that is just arbitrary, semi-arbitrary numbers. We don't have any rationale for why they are what they are. I don't know if other towns have policy to set as far as how they determine their fee schedule for new builds? Or if not, I mean, is that something that Rutland wants to look at is policy wise, so then at least there's a prescribed kind of formula? Or are we just looking to say, okay, 50% of 687.50 is just over 300 or whatever, so that we're going to raise it to just over 1,000, and that's that? Or I don't know. I kind of would like to have some sort of policy in place, but I don't know how to go. I don't have the information to make that decision right now.
It's researching it a little and actually taking an analysis of actually what is all behind these fees and what is going to create these fees. Obviously, a new house construction fee, there's a lot of elements behind it that would possibly have brought that to that point. There's planning, there's DPW somewhere involved, there's the land, there's a lot of hidden costs that just get added up to equate to that, to cover services provided. That takes a lot of digging. I think that's why they're at the level they're at in a lot of towns. Some towns, it's not ethical that they funded apartments with it, which is not ethical, but it's just to provide whatever the services to be fair for the customer, fair for the town, is to provide the services and cover the cost of those services.
Yeah.
And it would take a lot of digging to look at that.
Yeah, it's the offsetting the service cost. That's pretty much the idea.
Just true. I don't think that's as easy to try to devise such a formula, because it's all depending upon all the different rates of people who go out and everything else. And I think it's pretty scattered. I think they're just trying to do averages and reasonably close. But for my recommendation would be to go from $687.50 to $1,000, and that would still keep us well under the 1,382, but put us in a moderate range. But I don't think you're really going to find a formula that works. That's why everybody uses some different formula. There's a lot of different factors involved in terms of wage rates and everything. So,
all right, I'll entertain a motion from the board if the board would like to make a motion.
I can make the motion. I would make the motion to accept as a slate the adjustments in the building inspection fee schedule as presented, with the recommendation of the building inspector for the 50% increase on new home construction as suggested.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Jeff, can you repeat the motion? Sorry.
I was going to accept the recommendation of the building inspector as presented, as a slate, the adjustments to the schedule as presented, and per his recommendation of the 50% minimum increase to new builds. Basically, accept the recommendation of the building inspector.
Whitman will second.
For discussion, well, the inspector recommends between 25 and 50%. I would like to see 25% of the new builds. If we want to increase it over time, I think we can. I just, we do have some smaller builders in town. So I would just hate to stick those folks with a overwhelming increase.
He said 50%. Okay, that's why I was going ahead. I thought he said 50%.
Well, I left the option there. It is. It's something to think about more. I only looked into this 2 weeks ago. I mean, there's more should be analyzed a little bit. But that's why I put 25 to 50. Maybe you should discuss the matter, or it should be looked into a little more before you jump to that. But 50%, you can see 13 something is where it's at. 50% would bring you closer in line, but again,
about $1,000. 50% would bring it up to about $1,000. It's consistent with what the TA suggested too.
Again, I don't have any objection if the chair's 25% recommendation. I think we just need to get them up some. But if the board feels more comfortable to help local builders and put it 25%, I don't object to that if that's what the board would like to do.
Linda, have you hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could start at 25% with a yearly scale up to a maximum of 50%, just so it gives them a time, the time to adjust to the increase in fees.
Well, again, we have a motion and a second. I mean, we're having discussion right now, but we're gonna have to vote on the motion. So.
I'm sorry, but my concern, my confusion with the motion is that the recommendation was between 25 and 50, wasn't it? So it doesn't clarify.
Well, understood, but Jeff quantified it with 50%, which is in line.
Okay.
Recommendation was 25 to 50. And Jeff's motion was for the 50.
I can amend for an adjusted, I mean, I'm not headstrong either way. That's the number I heard when I asked the building inspector to give us an answer, and I heard 50. So, but I mean, be happy to modify if you'd like. For Lyndon's suggestion, do like a 3-year modified scale, 25 progressive to 50. That'd be 5% a year.
If my math,
That would be good.
that would,
Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
if my math is correct, at the 25%, that would put the fee around $860.
And increase for the next 3 years at 5% to total up to 50% by 2024.
That's a good prescription.
I mean, it's fair.
Okay, so I think, Jeff, if you amended your motion, we have to have Leah, are you okay with the amendment? Let me just restate the motion first to make sure everyone's on the same page. So Jeff's amended motion, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes, sir.
we had the conversation, but would be to accept the recommended fee schedule for the line items as provided by the building inspector with an increase of 25% for a new build construction, which will over the next 3 years ramp up to a 50% increase, which is still in line with the building inspector's recommendation. Because I think it comes out to a little bit more than 5% a year. So I don't want to put that percentage on there, but it's more, it'll ramp up over 3 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's my motion, sir.
Leah, are you okay with amending your second to encompass that?
Yep, I'm okay amending that.
Okay. If there's no further discussion or questions, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, and thank you, Dave, for all your hard work. Ron, you as well on this. Certainly appreciate bringing us in line with the surrounding communities.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we've taken that item out of order. So if we're going back into the order of items as presented, we have a discussion regarding the Rutland Heights concept plan. Just know that there is a public hearing to be held on February 24th, which is 2 days from today, for the general public. But based on the information provided, I want to open it up to the board. Ron, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I guess just this, that, you know, we put it on the agenda just so you guys, if you wanted to talk about it, could talk about it. But the reason it had to come to you is because part of the requirement of the notice of this public hearing is to notify this board. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of it, that you did get the notification. There's no action on this or anything like that, but if the board wanted to make any comments, we wanted to set the agenda in such a way there could be discussion if board members so chose.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Jeff?
Clarification, who is the select board hosting this meeting? Is this something that we have to attend?
No, it's not something you have to attend. It's just a public notice for anybody that wants to attend.
Who's running the meeting?
Interest.
HPDD.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, Leah, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to, for anyone that's watching and to get in the minutes, just that it looks like on the town website under the RDIC page, there's a proposed conceptual plan for the space as well as the announcement and everything. So there is more information available for folks to look at before the public meeting or public hearing.
Go ahead, Ron.
No, just to be clear, the date, it's Wednesday, February 24th. It's 6 p.m. is when the public hearing is going to be.
And it's on Zoom.
Yep.
So everyone can, it'll be good because people can look at it on the computer screen. And just to Leah's point, I would encourage anybody that's watching to kind of attend and take a look at that. It's been an exciting project, and it's been a lot of hard work for a lot of different boards and committees in town staff for the last few months to get to this point. So I would just encourage anyone to take a look at that. It's interesting. And Lyndon, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I want to thank Ron for getting the picture of the potential building. I continue to have somewhat concerns to see what the parking and the access will be, and I think that's a difficult location with that open parking lot concept with the strip mall across the street. So I hopefully they'll be addressing access and some of the controls that will be in place for that entrance.
It's a great point. All right, anything else from the board? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. We have Woods House. This issue came up again. We had discussed this in a prior meeting about the roof and the repair needed. The issue was that in order to apply for a historic commission grant, which I believe is due in the middle of March, Ron, is that correct?
Yeah.
We would need to place historical restrictions on the deed of the property, which if anyone has worked with deed restrictions on government nonprofit properties before or historic properties, once they're placed, they're very, very difficult to get rid of. And it also impacts the value of the building, the permanent use of the building. So I think that we wanted to put this on the agenda tonight to make a decision as a board, whether or not that's something that we wanted to do. Is that accurate, Ron?
No, it's 100% accurate. And, well, I always want grant money. We're not talking huge dollars here. And that permanent restriction, as you say, has big impact for many years to come. So it really is a question, and it's got to go to town meeting for final approval, but it really is a question what the long-term use of that building is on. And Peter's on here too. So, I'm sure he has comments about this, but once you do this, and if the town meeting does it, it's permanent. You're going to have this restriction on forever.
Does anyone from the board have any questions? I think if I can start off, my concern is we are having a facilities study done with community compact money. We also are going to be having in the near future a shortage, I think, for staff and office space. I know that our building right now is used for historical preservation purposes, but I personally not sure how I feel about tying up that building long term and preventing it from being used for anything other than. And Ron, the deed restriction would have to be in line with using it strictly for historical preservation or education purposes, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yep. The state of Massachusetts wants to preserve this forever. So that's the purpose of the deed restriction. If they're going to fund money for a historical building, they want it to be historical essentially forever. So, I mean, it's a stick, they give you a benefit, but there's a stick there after that, pretty strong thing. But again, I guess I don't know the building well enough to think of the long-term, what the needs of the community is, but it's one of those things that it depends upon, and I don't want to say this in a weird way, but it depends upon how much you value the use of this particular building for historic history forever. I don't know enough about it to do it. That's why I think Peter has to comment as to the long-term value of that building for historical reasons.
Jeff, then Leah.
Thank you. There's a reason why the state would want to preserve the historical value of it, not so much because of the building is fantastic. It's because of what took place in there. This is the studio of Franklin and Hazel Wood, and Franklin Wood, whose artwork is currently in the Smithsonian in there, that he conducted there. And Hazelwood was also a 20th century artist in there. So that's the significance of that. Also, the first police station, or the police station, and the Historical Society has been there for generations in there. So I think if you were to hear from the chair of the Historical Commission and also from the Historical Society, this is something that we do feel strongly about, preserving the historical prominence of the Hazel and Franklin Wood studio and house in there. And yes, it's being used as a historical museum, and all the more reason to preserve. And if you look at our charge as members of the Historical Commission, if there's anything in this town that's left that has some historical relevance that we can preserve, it's the items inside the Franklin Wood house in there. And so I think you're going to find that the Historical Commission, the Historical Society are going to feel very strongly about preserving this, and I think it's reasonable. You know, and the TA is correct that the end result goes to the town, and I think the decision of the board is, you know, should we or should we not put this on an article to let the townspeople decide? And I think that would be the prudent thing for this board to do, is to at least present it to the town, and then arguments can be made there. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Similar to Jeff, I wanted to ask if we could have time to hear from the Historical Commission and the Historical Society. Sure, similar to what Jeff said, that they are in favor of this, but provide us with a little bit more information. On the other hand, I think the need to repair the roof is a fairly high priority in the scheme of being able to maintain the integrity of that building. So I don't know if waiting, no matter what, I think the roof needs to be repaired. So if we're going to town meeting in May and the grant cycle then is essentially a year out, are there other opportunities either through CIPC or other grant money?
Yeah, usually the way these grants work with the historic grant is the grant will be awarded, I believe, pending a town vote on this. So you would include a copy of the warrant article with your, or a proposed warrant article with your grant application. But to your point, Leah, too, I mean, realistically, the way the grant funding cycle works and then town meeting, probably the earliest that we would be able to get that roof repaired would be the end of the summer. I mean, just as a realistic thing. And depending on when the decisions are made, usually the turnaround time, it could even be the fall before we even have a decision on that grant process. I haven't applied for that particular opportunity in a little bit of time. So, but it usually is, it's going to take probably 8 to 10 months to get that done, even if it's awarded. But usually that's how that, I mean, we would just have to present them with evidence that we're putting it on the warrant.
Right. And so I guess my question is, I would like to hear more from, you know, a formal, from both the Historical Commission as a whole, as well as the Historical Society as a whole, but also continue to pursue other opportunities to get that roof repaired. I don't want to put all of our eggs in this basket, because even if we were awarded the grant, it's still pending this going to town meeting and passing, and then it could happen. And that seems like there's potential for a lot of ifs. So that I just didn't want to I wanted to make sure that we weren't only looking at this as our only option.
Well, I'll say this to you, to Leah, that we're only talking about a grant of about $15,000 to $20,000. So it's not a massive amount of money. And you're correct, the chair is correct that it could be to the end of summer before we're awarded this. And you know, we do need to work on that roof. So, you know, as you remember, we didn't have a lot of free cash left last year. So we're very limited as to finding money for that repair. But we, you know, I reached out to the state rep and state senator, and that's how we got to this path where we are about this particular grant. But I think you may be right. We need to take action somehow on this before the end of summer. So the grant may be immaterial, but I still think that doesn't change the fact if you want to do the historical protection of this building or not. Either way, that's, I think you got to decide that issue for future grants, you know, or future things. Yeah.
What has been done, though, my question, Ron, is we had talked about this last time with this building in particular. When you get money from Mass Historic, you know, they're not going to fund a project where they're probably going to want to take a look at anything that's been done to the property prior to make sure it's in line with historical preservation standards. I mean, it's already on the list, right?
Yep.
So has there been anything done that we have not gone to Mass Historic for? And is there some additional impositions they could come back and make to say, well, we're going to give you this money, but we have to have you bring X, Y, and Z in line in terms of what is historically acceptable at the time before we do that. That's my fear too, is it's going to trigger more expenses.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that question is better to Peter. I'll say this, that it's a very complicated grant. They want tons of information to apply for it. So we're going to have to act quickly. And to Leah's point, you know, we only have a little bit into March where we have to apply for this thing. So we don't have a lot of time to get, I think if we ask the Historical Commission, all those guys would be supportive of putting the restriction on forever. I don't think that's a question. But I don't know if there's anything that's been done to that building that they might ask us about. And frankly, Peter, could probably tell us what work has been done on that building. I have no idea. It's a historical question itself.
I know the roof through the chair.
Go ahead, Peter.
I know the roof was repaired the last time around 2002. That is my understanding. I should clarify, I know Ron and I were looking at the state register as far as whether the Woodhouse is on there. And apparently we got a little confused. I have a copy of the 2019 State Register of Historic Buildings, Historic Places, and the only place I have on there listed for Rutland, there's only one listing for Rutland, and it's the Rufus Putnam House.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
So not only is the Woodhouse not on the National Register yet, although we're working on it, it's not even on the state register, as it turns out.
The state has two registered tools. There's a mapping tool, which I think has several locations, I believe, listed in Rutland. And then the Rufus Putnam, I think, is a separate designation. It's just, again, it's been a while since I've worked with it. So we're going to need clarification on that. Because, Ron, did you talk to the funder?
I had thought, and me and Peter did this together, I thought, we found it on the state register, so we thought it was okay to stay one. I'm just learning about it. Okay, it's not on the national, I don't think that's a requirement. I think it was a requirement that was on the state one. And I think we meet that requirement, Peter. So I'm a little bit confused as to, I thought I heard you say it's not on the state one. I thought we already determined that it was.
That's what I thought, and then I got this, it's actually, it was in the mailbox for the Historical Commission. It's
It was on the state website, Pete, where we checked. And the state
Right.
website came out back saying it was on the website. So I thought it was okay, but I don't know. Oh, can't look at it.
That's what I thought too. Apparently there's a column in here, I'll show you, pull it out.
What are you looking at, Peter?
It's a booklet. Apparently they give it out every so often, and they put it in our mailbox from Mass Historical. It's a whole publication of all the historical buildings and sites and districts in the entire state.
Yeah.
And all we have listed here, or at least for the, I'll show you. You have Russell, Rutland, you have the Rufus Putnam House, and then you have Salem. And I think what confused us was that if you look at the website, there's a little column for designation, and they have all these little codes that I should have paid a little more attention to, apparently. And there was one that said SR for a state register. I looked up at the website again, I think it was last week. And I was, I mentioned this to Jeff, actually.
Yeah, see, I think there's some confusion because you're looking at the actual booklet that the state sends out. We need to get clarification on whether that is the determinant for the application, or there's also a separate list in conjunction with Mass Historic through the Mass Cultural Resource Information Center, for which Rutland has about 20 listings, one of which is the Franklin Tower Wood House at 232 Main Street. So if that is the threshold for the grant, then we're set. If it is the Mass Historic official list that you're holding, Peter, I'm not sure that it's on the list, but again, I haven't ordered it in a while, so we just need to make sure that we're eligible through one or the other. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Okay. And for anyone that's interested in anything that's listed through the Mass Cultural Resource Information System, it looks like there's about 20 sites in Rutland, and it's at macris.net. So that's the state's Cultural Resource Information Center. Leah, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to pass along to Peter and Ron maybe. The Mass Cultural Council has a cultural facilities fund. It needs to be applied. The grant, I think grants need to be applied by a nonprofit. I'm not sure if the Historical Society is a nonprofit, and if they could work on that. I can send the link to it. I don't know what the application process. I just know, I'm pretty sure that that's the fund that funded a chunk of the old Sterling Town Hall repairs in Sterling. So I can pass that info along to you, Peter and Ron.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do we need to have a cultural council to receive that funding through the Mass Cultural Council?
I'm not sure. It doesn't specifically seem to say. I haven't read it that in depth, but I thought Rutland does have a cultural council. They award grants.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if they would need to sponsor the application or not. I'm not sure how it's set up.
From what I saw when I was reading about the application process, the town could apply for it directly.
Okay.
What I read when I read through the process, I was trying to look at all the different things we would have to do, and that was clear to me that the town could actually apply for it. It's a 50% grant, so you know if the roof is 40 grand, the most we can apply for is 20. That's the way it works. So either way, we're going to have to come up with half of the funding to fix this roof.
Okay. So I think then Jeff, and then I'll make a recommendation. Go ahead, Jeff.
I real quickly just wanted to remind the board of the significance of the land itself between the Franklin Wood House and the Franklin Wood Studio. In between there, it does hold a time capsule and a Veterans War Memorial. A town Veterans War Memorial sits directly behind the Wood House. So this is not an area that we'd like to see raised at any time to put in an office building or something.
Well, I don't. The issue though, Jeff, is I don't think anyone's talking about raising the site.
But that's the importance.
Well, when you put deed restrictions on the property, for example, what we did with the time capsule would have been considered inappropriate with the Mass Historic Commission, or it could have been. So it's going to restrict activities that you can do on that site, or placement of monuments or signage, paint colors, everything. So I think what we need to do is if the board is okay with tabling this, Ron and Peter, maybe we can have a final determination as to whether or not we can be eligible for the grant based on the listing.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, in this case, I don't think that works because I think Peter, you remember, was it March 4th, the deadline for the application? So if we're going to apply, we have to give them some potential motion that we're going to bring to town meeting. So I'm not sure if we waited another 2 weeks, I don't think we would probably be able to apply for the grant.
Just put it on the warrant and let the townspeople decide.
All right, the board wants to make a motion. I don't see how we proceed with putting something on the warrant if we're not sure that we're going to be able to do it. Leah, go ahead.
I have a question. If we apply for the grant and then end up not putting it, is it applying for the grant assuming you're putting it on the warrant? Do you have to show verification of that? Or if we end up not putting it on the warrant or it fails at town meeting, then we just aren't, even if we are awarded the funding, we obviously don't receive it. I'm not sure how it works.
So that's correct. So in order to apply for the grant, you have to show that you're going to have an article on the warrant. But as the chair said earlier, they wouldn't approve the money until it was actually approved at town meeting. And then after that, we would eventually get the money. But that's what I think his comments were right on, that we wouldn't see this money until mid to late summer by the time we saw this grant money.
Right. So, but in order to apply, we need to have proof that we're putting it on a warrant, basically, and we can't apply and kind of continue to work on this as a board and then go forward.
Correct. That's what I believe. I believe you'd have to have the motion voted by the board of what you're putting on the warrant, because they say you have to have that with the application, is the way it was explained to me. So I think you need, now again, does it get approved? If it gets approved and you don't approve it on the town meeting, it goes down the drain anyway.
I think we can probably, you could probably submit a mock warrant article without actually having committed to placing it yet. I mean, I just don't think we know enough. But I'll entertain a motion by the board. I mean, if the board wants to do it. I just think for this, it's preliminary at this point, and we really need to have an explanation as to what those deed restrictions are going to be for the use of that property. Because it's not just, everyone wants to see it preserved, and that's great, but I mean, when you have deed restrictions on Mass Historic properties, it opens up a lot of can of worms for potential future spending for update, like maintenance costs for the building that we, quite frankly, in our budget at this point don't have. So.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Peter, go ahead.
I'm just wondering what the process is to get this put on the deed. Having having worked now on conservation restriction, and it's fundamentally a similar process, going through that at town meeting, that by itself, I don't know that we have time before town meeting to get all the work done to get an approved historic restriction through the complete process, which includes our review, legal review. I suspect somebody at the state has to review it as well. I'm not sure I understand exactly what we would be voting for at town meeting.
I think the vote at town meeting would initiate that process. But to your point, Peter, I can see how it gets kind of hairy because you're not going to have the specifics of what a deed rider would look like until it's written. And that's going to be an expense and it's going to take time to do that. And you're going to have to work with Mass Historic as to what they want to see in that deed rider.
Right.
So is that kind of where you're getting at, Peter?
Yeah, I think you got to hit it right on the head. It's there. So all we would be doing at town meeting fundamentally is philosophically saying, yeah, we'd like to do this at the discretion of the select board, I imagine, or historical commission or someone to act on behalf of the town to make the deed restriction legal and correct.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That would be done after the town meeting. The question of town meeting and what people would want to know about it is what the chair says. Exactly what is the meaning of the deed restriction?
Mm-hmm.
That should come out and be discussed at town meeting and explained. But I think the dynamics of actually doing the deed restriction is something that would probably be put to me after town meeting. If the vote was to agree to a deed restriction, you're correct, there would be some legal pieces combined to that, but I think that's just a process question that we would take care of.
Okay.
If I go back to the way the conservation restriction works, is that after everybody agrees to it, the select board signs fundamentally as agents of the town to do the work. If the town is required to do a vote on the deed restriction, which is, I'm wondering if that's what has to actually happen at town meeting. Not at the concept of a deed, but they have to actually vote on the deed restriction. I don't know. I'm asking questions.
I think the answer is no, but I'm not a lawyer and I don't feel 100% comfortable answering that, but I don't think that would be the requirement. I think that would be drafted later. There may be a requirement that when we write up the legal documentation to put on that restriction, that it has to go to the Board of Selectmen for some kind of final adoption. That would make sense to me, but I think the town meeting just has to formally say they want to put the restriction on.
Yeah, all I can say about the conservation restriction is that process and the signature set is based on MGL.
Yeah.
And so we should know what MGL says about historic restrictions as well.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Sorry, Mitch. It's Leah. I think that this is an important topic to continue discussing and potentially offer to our town meeting. I feel like we don't have the information right now to make. I don't feel comfortable making a decision at this very moment, which would then set the precedent to go ahead and apply for the grant. It's possible that, information in the next 2-4 weeks when we go to set the town warrant would be enough for me to feel comfortable saying yes, but I don't feel comfortable right now saying that I'm comfortable with that kind of pre-stipulation and go ahead and apply for the grant.
I kind of agree with that. And realistically too, if we can clear up some of these questions before the application, we could always host an emergency meeting quickly to kind of get this out of the way as well. Just as take the one item. So really yeah. All right, so I think at this point, we have a bunch of homework I think we probably have to do. Maybe we table this. And again, Ron, if you need something for the application, we can get something on the books and get you what you need prior to that application.
My understanding is that I don't, listen, we're only talking about 15 to 20 grand here. So I don't think that this has to be something we do right away. We just have to take care of the repair of the roof in some format. I mean, as to the long-term, should this be a deed restricted property, that doesn't have to be done even at this town meeting. So I think that underlying issue can be done more long-term. I mean, this is really about 15 grand, and I don't think it's the end of the world. We have to rush to do it, but one way or another, I'm going to come back to you with some solution to the roof issue because we have to deal with that.
Okay. So I think, do we get a motion to table this for a future meeting? We'll bring it back up for it's a good discussion, but I think we can put it off.
Motion to table.
All right, I'll second. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a roll call vote. Stillings, Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for delving into that. Next on the agenda, we have a discussion regarding the town charter. Ron and Peter, I believe that's probably for you.
Yeah, this is one that I've kind of been dealing with. So this kind of was started before I came to town. I think Mike had working with the Collins Center, and he had a proposal from the Collins Center to help us develop a charter. I spent a great deal of time on the phone with Mike, who works for the Collins Center, Mike Ward. And we talked about this, and I want to get clarity, how does this process start? And I told him about the bylaw committee and stuff, and what's the process? What should come first, the charter, the bylaw committee, whatever. And he said, normally the charter development comes before a bylaw process, but he said that clearly you can do them both at the same time, developing the charter and the bylaws. But we want to make sure that when we develop a charter commission, that somebody from the bylaw commission is on it, because they both have to work kind of hand in hand. So I sent you guys a letter on February 9th about the creation of a charter process, what we call a town charter development. And I outlined the first part of it. The steps, as I understand them, is the selectmen would create a charter drafting committee between 7 and 11 members. Then the Board of Selectmen, after the proposed charter was done, you guys made all the changes and everything else, the Board of Selectmen would vote to move forward the proposed charter changes or charter adoption to the town meeting for approval. Then it actually has to go back to the legislature for a home rule petition and special act. They would approve it. And then after that, it goes through a town election. So developing a charter is quite a time consuming process, and rightfully so, because it's essentially your constitution for the town. So I wanted to get you guys on board if you wanted to do this, and I suspect you do, since you've been talking about it for a long time, is we need to start thinking about creating a charter drafting committee to do this. And like I said, the one main person you want to make sure, and Peter's on it too, the bylaw committee, Peter, somebody on that board needs to kind of be the relay between those two boards, because the charter, whatever you put in the charter, overrides bylaws. The charter is your prevailing document. So it's key that those two mesh and work together. You don't want to put in bylaws and put a charter that overrides the bylaws, right? So they need to be consistent in terms of process. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. We don't need to take action tonight, but I do think if the board wants to create a drafting charter committee, we need to soon bring that up and start that process moving forward if that's the desire of the board. I guess the money's already set aside for it.
Go ahead, Leah.
Mitch, it's Leah. I just wanted to reiterate, this was one of the things I kind of had pushed for the first couple years that I was on the board. In going through our initial TA screening after Margaret left, a lot of the feedback we had from applicants was they had a lot of concerns that we didn't have a charter, and it was the stability of the position. So, and working with at the time, our consultant, they were really pushing us to also look at developing a charter, especially as the town grows and there needs to be more a stronger administrator role. So that was the rationale behind it. And so the money was approved at town meeting a couple years ago. So it's just been kind of the pandemic, we were getting ready to ramp up and the pandemic hit and it obviously fell off. So I am thankful, Ron, that you're bringing it back to the forefront. And I agree, we don't need to do anything tonight, but it's nice to know that we're starting to think about it again. Thank you.
So, if I could, Mr. Chairman, in response there, please.
Go ahead.
So I just want to make it clear, right? From my perspective, I think the town bylaws are way out of date, and I know Peter and those guys are working on it. But it from my point of view as a town administrator, is very unclear at it, who has the power to do what in this town. It's really not spelled out in any logical way. So it always makes me concerned because I don't want to do things that, the Board of Selectmen feels is their role versus my role and stuff. So I definitely 100% support the concept of a charter in developing something that kind of, as you say, I said, it's the constitution of the town. It's how your future of the town wants to be. And you can redesign the town administrator role or make it a town manager. Well, this is your opportunity to figure out, what's your long-term plan for the town in terms of its leadership and who has the power to do what. So I like the concept of this. Truthfully, in my opinion, I probably would have did this before I did the bylaw committee, but we're way down the bylaw committee path now. So, and I think that bylaw committee through Peter can offer a lot of support to the Charter Revision Commission. So they won't have to start from scratch. They can look at those bylaws that Peter and his team have worked on and build off of that. So it's a little bit backwards, but I think it works.
Okay. So I think, I know we're getting late. We put this on if we want to take some time over the next couple of weeks, think about how we want to handle this and put it on as an action item for the next meeting. Leah, go ahead.
If I may quickly, Ron, I think the Collins Center worked. I think Mike had told me that with Hubbardston to develop their charter and a few other area towns, if maybe you can send those around to us just so that as we have time, we can take a look at what other towns in the area have done that have worked with Collins. And that way we, can formulate questions or suggestions or whatever. So it's a more in-depth conversation.
So Leah, I did ask him that question because I assume that they use some templates from other towns when they build ours, right? Towns that are very much like ours. I can ask Mike if he'd provide us at least a couple of those templates for us to look at. So I will take care of that. I'll do that and try to move that forward to you guys, okay?
Thank you.
Great. Any more questions? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to item number 100. We have a discussion regarding AMP Energy Solar Field. I think we have somebody here to discuss that project as well. Ron, do you want to give us kind of a brief?
Yeah, this is an interesting type of project. And it's been complicated for me because when you do a solar project in town, there's a couple of real benefits from the town. One is the benefit of a pilot agreement for taxes. And in many cases, the other piece of this is a lease. Like we're talking about the potential solar fields, and I say potential because it's kind of falling apart on the Heights property where we're leasing the land out. So you get two revenue sources. When I first came in here, literally, I think my first week, I was invited to meet with a company called AMP, and the representative of AMP is on this call. And I'm going to have her speak to the details of this. Victoria Ireton is her name. This one is, the problem as I understand it with this particular project is it's a long way from the substation in terms of getting power from the solar field location to the actual substation. And because of the cost of making that connection in that distance, it makes it very difficult for them to make this a viable project. And the state, as part of its program, offers an incentive if a municipality has direct involvement in the project. So in other words, if we were to, for instance, they built it and we were going to manage the facility and take care of it or whatever, then the developer would get extra amount of money as a result, as an incentive for making it a cooperative town, sort of a private public partnership kind of system. And that process, as I understand it, is pretty unique in the state of Massachusetts. And it resulted in me asking a lot of questions because I've never seen it before and because it is unique to the state as to how that would work. And they are proposing effectively that kind of a partnership to make it worthwhile for them to do this. What that did to me, because I didn't understand it, I called the state and talked to the State Department of Energy, and there's a name for it, I don't remember the exact title, but Department of Energy, and I asked them about this. I said, because in the discussion with AMP, their proposal was that, we could become the general contractor with them, and we could subcontract out the work of maintaining the facility itself. So we really wouldn't be doing any of the maintenance of the facility. We would essentially just be the general contractor, hiring somebody to come out and run the facility. And I went, well, that doesn't seem like a town partnership. That's just a process where, we kind of subcontract back on. And does the state consider that to be a partnership, that they could get this extra money for the project? So I called them, and it took me a number of emails and phone calls, and I finally got through to them. And what became clear is they said, well, the law does not say that you can't do that. It doesn't say that you can. From their point of view, it's an open discussion, and they would consider every project individually as it came before them. But I never got a clear answer if this process would work or not. And then I've discussed it with AMP about, what would be the liability of the town if the town were to take over managing or controlling the actual facility? What liability would be put on this? And the question was, well, we can check out and do that through an attorney, and AMP would be willing to provide, the money for legal fees to look at that issue, because they had a lot of concerns about the liability. So in effect, the benefits of this project to the town would be the pilot agreement, payment in lieu of taxes for the property, and then some kind of fee to be the general contractor, and maybe using the wrong term, to kind of run the facility. But there's a lot of questions that, and I said to them, so there's no big surprise to Victoria, that I said, I'm concerned that we do all this work, it goes to the state, and then the state goes, no, we don't really like this concept. Because, either myself or AMP, we both reached out to the state, and I don't think the state gave us a real good answer. They kind of left us in, well, we'll look at it. So that kind of highlights it. I'm concerned. I think there's some potential value in this, but there's a lot of issues that I think are just very complicated. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Victoria of AMP, who I told them, they asked me if we could put on the agenda, and I said, absolutely. I talked to the chair, and he said that he'd be happy to put on the agenda for discussion. I can't say that I support or oppose this. I just have a lot of concerns about it. With that, Mr. Chair, if it's okay to turn it over to Victoria for, I hope I explained it correctly. If not, I'm sure she'll correct me, but she has a better understanding.
Thank you, Victoria. Go ahead.
My apologies. I'm actually the next agenda item. I'm here on behalf of 10X Strategies.
That's right. I'm sorry, Lawrence. Yeah. Lawrence is on for AMP.
I'm sorry, Lawrence Cook. My apologies. I confused the two.
Yeah, that's okay. You'd have thought the amount I'd harassed you over the last couple of months since you got your feet under the desk, you'd remember my name.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Ron. That gives a very high level sort of background to it. And first of all, you may notice an accent. I have been accused of speaking rather quickly. So if I do speak too quickly for you to understand, please ask me to repeat it or tell me to slow down. So I think Ron captured it pretty well. I'll expand a little bit. So we spoke to the DOER when they announced this addition to the SMART program, and the response from them was any contract signed by the town would meet the requirements. So because of that, that's when we started talking to the old town manager and then the interim town manager, and then Ron once he got involved. In his response, they kind of a little bit more. They're a little bit more wishy-washy about it. So we've gone through for some further guidance to them, and they've really basically just said, look, we can only make a determination when we see something in front of us. So the purpose of coming today is to kind of find out whether we can get the select board to kind of agree that the town can have these further discussions, that we can get something in front of the DOER to get them to make a determination on the outline of a proposal. So some of the complications are that a solar farm is a relatively simple technology, but some of the functions for operation maintenance can be quite specialist. Certain things require certain qualifications. They require certain skill levels and experience in the particular technology. And very few towns within the Commonwealth would actually have that staff to call on. So that being the case, I think it is accepted that there is going to be a certain amount of subcontracting would be available and appropriate under the DOER program, and that it could be filled in at a later date if the skills and experience came to the town with new staff or anything like that. So it's really just trying to move it forward to the next step. I did circulate Ron circulated on my behalf a presentation. Did anyone go through that? Do you want me to kind of go through it a little bit more now, or do you just want me to kind of keep waffling on and have questions as they arise?
Well, let me just ask. It was included in our packet for tonight. It was a short, fairly easy to understand proposal. Did everyone get a chance to look at it? Okay. I guess my underlying question with this, and with these projects in general, because we've had a lot of solar projects come in and out. I know, for example, the one up at RDIC appears as if that might not be tenable moving forward, which we kind of got warned about a few months ago. So these projects are difficult to pull off, and we are going to have to commit staff time and energy for whatever is put forward in any of these projects. And I want to ask Ron, I want to ask Lawrence, I'm not sure who the appropriate entity is. What is the overall benefit, the net benefit to the town after all things are considered in terms of dollar figures?
So I think Lawrence has defined out the pilot amount, and I don't remember in front of me. I think it's part of his presentation, the pilot amount. So if Lawrence, if you can go through what you think the revenue would be.
Yeah. So
pilot over 20 years, and then I think the operations piece is a little bit more complicated, but I think you did it on some kind of kilowatt.
Yeah, so this is obviously our proposal. It's up for further negotiation and things like that. But these are kind of in or around what we're thinking. And the pilot would be for $7,500 per megawatt DC, which would equate to about a little short of 61,000 each year, which comes in at 1.2 million over the 20 years in pilot. And then for the operations and management fee, it would be 5,000 a year per megawatt DC, which comes out to 40.5 each year. So combined, you're looking at $100,000 in revenue to the town. For that management fee, we would expect that the how we envisage it is that we have a specialist operations and maintenance company that deals with our sites, that have the manpower and things to deal with everything, and the suggestion is that the town of Rutland would contract with them and to deliver the operations and maintenance to the site, take a management fee, and for coordination of that contract, and to take on any of the work that is possible that the town would like to do, such as snow plowing or vegetation management, the regular inspections, which are just drive-bys to make sure that the gates haven't been broken into or anything like that, and that kind of thing. And as things move forward over the next 20 years, if you have new staff come on, you have electrical expertise or something like that could do some of the more reactive repairs, then that would be a possibility as well.
So that's kind of that kind of is where my areas of concern are, right? So first of all, we don't have any extra staff to maintain a facility like this, nor do we have anyone on staff that is an expert in this area that could do any of that work. So effectively, we contract it out, and as you heard from him, we could actually contract it back out to the company that maintains your current facilities, right? So that led me to the question of, is this really a partnership or not, or are we just kind of getting a fee in this process? And the state, the state plan of, I thought what the concept of this under state law was that it would be some kind of real partnership between the town and the company, and they would add this extra incentive money. That was my question of DOER was, is this really it's a partnership between the town, or is it just a management fee for running it? And that was a question I couldn't get the answer.
Yeah, so I mean, there are, obviously we're talking specifically about the operations and maintenance things, but there are other opportunities for the town to get involved as a partnership. I mean, one of the things that we're proposing to do would be to seed everything with a wildflower pollinator species and have that maintained and things like that. I know that in Toronto, where our head office is located, we carried out solar installations on the Toronto School Board properties. And part of that is we provided an education program to the local schools so that they could understand more about renewable energy and everything around it. So there are things around the solar farm, both education and biodiversity and things like that, that other areas of the town can be involved in, but those are outside of the scope of the kind of the DOER operations and maintenance thing. So yeah, I mean, it's our willingness is to work with the town. I mean, AMP is an owner operator of sites. Our entire business model is on us owning and operating these sites for the long term. We're not just a developer that's trying to make this stack up to be able to sell the project and then move on. AMP is coming to you as the expected owner of this property for the or expected owner of the system for the next minimum of 20 years, but likely 35 to 40 is the total lifespan of the project. So it's just really to get the outline of something that the town would be happy with us paying for your legal review of to make sure there's no obligations, and to get that in front of the DOER to find out if it is something that can be acceptable for them. The idea is then that would be presented at a town meeting for the town to get full buy-in on the proposal.
So just to be clear, because I don't want to leave a misunderstanding, I think AMP is a quality company. I have no issues whatsoever with the quality of the company. They seem fine. They're very experienced in this area. But this project will take some of my time to figure this all out with the legal team and figure out what makes sense here. So it's going to be somewhat time consuming. And, I don't know, given what I'm seeing on a state level or with National Grid, if this project will eventually get approved or not. And maybe Lawrence, you can comment to the board, because you know what's going on with those other projects falling apart. How does that relate to you guys?
Yeah, so it doesn't really relate to us. So the problems that are being experienced in Rutland and the immediate area is that there is no grid capacity. I think we have taken the last bit of capacity in the Treasure Island substation. But in order for them to provide us that capacity, they want us to reconductor the entire three-phase line from the Treasure Island substation to the project, which is around 5 miles, I think, in total. So the interconnection cost is north of $5 million, which is very high for these types of projects. The other projects that Rutland are putting through and other ones put forward by other developers that you may have been aware of, they're all kind of included in an area study, which is going to take every project in the area and decide how they can provide the capacity to deal with that, whether that's the building of a new substation, upgrading transmission lines, or just saying, sorry, that there is no further capacity that we can feasibly put there. So yeah, we aren't in that study. We have an interconnection agreement that has been provided. We're just trying to make the project economics work. The two options for the town involvement are that they own the land, or they are involved in the owner operations of maintenance. With the land in question, it's part of a family farm. You all know it. It's been there for 100 years or so, and the purpose of the owner, Skip, getting involved with us is to preserve that family farm, and so the option of the town owning the land is not possible. So the other two options are this operations and maintenance, which we think provides some additional benefits to the town, or there is another route which is through a low and middle income community solar farm model, but we're unsure of the size of that market as to whether that works.
Okay. Are there any further questions from the board regarding the project? If not, I just have a couple things. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Mitch. I guess I have a couple a couple questions. And I went through some of the stuff today, and I still have a lot of questions. I don't think we'll get them all answered tonight by any means. But Ron, I know in the past the town had worked very closely with a solar consultant. I believe it was Beth, and I think we worked with Diane also for the assessor side of things. Have you reached out to her at all, to either one of them, to her, to see? I'm worried that, I guess my concern is what's in the best interest for the town. And I would like to have feedback or someone that knows the town a little bit. I think both of them were involved with the town-owned property solar projects at the Heights as well as Wheeler Road, which I understand are up in the air because of the capacity issue. But yeah, so that's one of my questions.
The answer to that question is you're right on target. Had a lot of discussions with Beth on Wheeler Road and the Heights property. She's not a consultant on this one. We've not had a discussion regarding the AMP project, other than there's a potential sale of the Heights property one in the Wheeler Road. There's a potential sale by that developer to outside companies. And I asked Beth to reach out to talk to AMP about that as well. But I have not discussed this with her. And truthfully, because of the uniqueness of this proposal, I'm not sure she could offer a lot, because I don't, Lawrence, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't, in my conversation, we don't know of any other town right now that is doing the type of proposal that Lawrence is asking, or having Rutland consider. So,
well, and it's just here too. I mean, this is on private land, so I think it's my understanding of this project is the town would simply be collecting a pilot fee and then would have to subcontract out the maintenance of the infrastructure, and that would be the extent of the town's involvement, other than procuring the project itself. Is that
so? If I may, Mitch, this is one of my other questions, is if it's on private property, then I'm not sure why it comes before the board. I mean, I guess it's because it's this private partnership, private town partnership, but which is a gray area. And I would like to have an advocate personally for the town who knows the town and is coming at it from what's the best interest for the town, and from that perspective, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
I think that would be us and the town administrator. I know we work with a consultant on other projects. I just think this is a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a little bit different of an animal in terms of the structure of how this is all being put together.
Yeah, and I don't know if, because of uniqueness, I don't know that Beth could offer much in this. I could have a short conversation with her about it. I just don't know if she could offer much on this. She is more of an expert on the whole solar issue. This is more of a question of DOER would approve this, and would that allow AMP to be able to get that incentive money? I'm not sure that is a question of Beth. It's really a question of the state. And since the state isn't giving me an answer, it's making it complicated. Leah, your point about this is private property is interesting. So I imagine that the agreement that we'd have to check with the lawyers is the private owner of the property would have to give the town control of that property. And then, even though we wouldn't own it, we'd have to have some kind of control, because effectively we would be hiring a company to manage the solar project on private property. So that's all the legal stuff I'm talking about. I don't know the answers to that.
I can offer a little bit about that. So you would be contracted with AMP, not the landowner, because we have the lease with the landowner. So the contract would be with AMP rather than with the landowner.
That makes sense.
I think what Beth is phenomenal. I've dealt with her on RFPs in towns for several years. What she would be able to do is assess things and provide you with guidance as to whether it's offering value or whether it's offering market rates, because she obviously has that experience within the market with other towns and what other developers are offering and things like that. I would welcome her involvement. I wouldn't advise against it or anything like that. I'd happily work with Beth and her team, as well as getting through the next stage, which is obviously can we remove the liability, any liability being placed on the town. Our lawyers believe we can. Your lawyers would obviously have to talk with our lawyers and see if they can reach an agreement, and we would be happy to pay for those conversations to take place.
Yeah, I mean, I think really we need, in my opinion, we probably need some more information, but I think it's worth looking at. I mean, we have a $400,000 deficit in our budget right now. I know a few weeks ago we talked about the regional rec picking up another town and cutting that deficit. If we're going to be receiving a large payment, pilot amount through a project like this, that could also help cut that deficit, and there's no risk to the town or liability, I think we should at least explore it. I think, Leah, if we want to bring it, I'm not sure what Beth would charge us to come in and take a look for an assessment on the project, but I think that's certainly something that maybe Ron would be interested in doing. But I guess, you know, and I want to ask Lyndon, if I can, in working with farming, like, is this something that's becoming more common and prevalent in some of these larger farm parcels, solar?
I don't know about the part is like partnering with the towns. I mean, the farms obviously are doing a lot with solar to just compensate for income and purposes and stuff for their own use. I haven't seen a lot of partnerships with the towns specifically with the farms. But.
This is brand new. The first mention of it was when it was, I think April last year was when it was adopted as an additional incentive, and because the area study that's impacting all of Massachusetts, or pretty much most of Massachusetts for most of the past year, there hasn't been a huge amount moving forward. We're talking with at least one other town, I think 2 towns, about this setup. One of them is a little bit more different because we're actually talking about 4 separate farms within the town. So because of that, you're talking about 4 times the amount of work and things like that. It's a larger municipality with more staff and things like that. So the whole idea is of the incentive was to get municipalities involved in solar. If the town doesn't own the land, then the only way that they can deal with the operation and maintenance is through a large amount of subcontracting. As I said, there's some technical stuff that needs to happen. Most of it is fairly straightforward, but you need some of it like NABCEP qualifications and things like that. So there has to be the thought that certain elements of it would be subcontracted, and then the question is, at what point does that reasonably come to an end? What would be reasonably expected for a town to take on? And I mean, certainly, as I said, the 2 things that are probably the most common for municipalities would be vegetation management and snow plowing.
Okay. Leah.
Thank you, Lawrence and Ron and Mitch. I guess I would want a little bit I would want to look at the numbers. I looked through the presentation, Lawrence, and I see, I think on page 6, there's a direct benefits and operation costs subcontracting. And I want to be cautious that for us as a board, that a large initial pilot payment is attractive, but then our long-term expenses end up being a wash, or, you know, over the life of 20 years, not very significant amount, or not as much as the town had hoped for. And so I want to caution us as a board to not just bite at the potential for a big chunk of money. And that's part of the reason I was suggesting Beth and or Diane to help us understand the reality of those numbers.
Yeah, that's understood. And we're obviously happy to have those conversations and delve deeper and things like that as we get direction from the DOER, from lawyers and that kind of thing. The purpose of this meeting is just really to take it on to that next step and just say, can we just get something in front of the DOER to say whether this is possible?
I think to Leah's point, though, I think what would be, I know that you included right now, I think a pilot payment of 10 years maybe in the presentation, and you had indicated this was all kind of negotiable. Mm-hmm. I think we need to engage in a discussion as to what that means and like what the length is, because I think Leah's right. I mean, in by itself, this is an attractive proposal in terms of the pilot, as long as we are able to clear a benefit for the town that would far supersede our expenses in the subcontracted amount. So if we're looking, and Ron, you're working this project, are you looking for, I guess, just conceptual support to continue negotiations? Or what would you like from the board?
So this is going to be somewhat time consuming because it's a whole new process, and it's going to take some serious discussion with the lawyers. And then frankly, at some point, we're going to have to negotiate an agreement for the contracting of this operation. So this is not a couple of hours worth of work with lawyers. This is a significant kind of deal to figure this out. And I'm glad that AMP will pay for it. So I guess I'm trying to look my time can go to a lot of different places. And is this something, the value here, in my opinion, is mostly around the pilot. The operation fee, I don't think is that significant. The $100,000, and we have whatever resource we have to put into it, takes away from that $100,000. I don't see that the contracting out to be a real big dollar benefit for us. So we get pilot no matter what solar project is developed anywhere in town. The pilot's the pilot, So the real question here is, I'm willing to do whatever the board wants. If you want me to go on this path, it's going to take them some time to do this, and there's value. I don't know. Again, I'm concerned the state's not even going to approve it. That's my biggest concern.
So one thing I would add as well is that $5,000 for the operations and maintenance is the fee for the town. Any work that is required as under the subcontract, any of the reactive maintenance and that kind of stuff, is covered separately. That $5,000 is just for the town's management of it. All of the things like the snow plowing, the vegetation management, those are all paid for separately and covered. So that $5,000, you wouldn't be expected to pay for for anything other than just the time involved in managing the contract.
So the bottom line is it's up to the board. If the board wants me to move forward in this direction, then I'll work out the process as to the big question on the legalities of this. And I guess what I would say is that AMP would pay that direct payment to the lawyers, and we would use Copeland and Page, and they would just pay directly. Copeland and Page would bill them directly for whatever legal information we would have. That's what we would do with that probably. We can bring in Beth a little bit if we're going to go on this path to look at the dollars of the project, as you say, negotiate the terms of the pilot itself. There's pilot agreements that are established all over the place that document some dollar value per, I think it's kilowatt hour. So, what's a good fee? It's all over the board, all across the state. So I could look at things like Southbridge and pull out what they did and kind of compare it to that and work with Beth a little bit on that. That will cost us some money for Beth. But my biggest concern is that, as I said before, it's a significant amount of time. And again, I still have that concern about what DOER is going to do with this or not, because in my opinion, it doesn't meet the intent of the law as well as I think it should. And I never got that warm and fuzzy feeling from DOER, but they didn't say no either. So, it's kind of a toss.
I agree with you, Ron. I think they've created this incentive without actually thinking through as to how it would actually be delivered. And so we're asking questions now about things that they possibly should have thought about before they did it.
That's exactly right. But that leaves us hanging. It really does.
It does leave us hanging, and that's why I said at the moment we're not asking for a commitment or anything like that, other than to let's get something in front of the DOER to find out if this is a go, and in parallel to that, to find out whether we can legally protect the town. And if we have those two things in place, that the town doesn't have any liability and is suitably protected, and the DOER says yes, then we can get to the nuts and bolts of it, bring Beth on board to talk about the actual values, and then put it forward to a town meeting if everybody's agreed.
So Lawrence, I guess here's what I would ask you directly. What exactly do we have to get before DOER for their consideration? Are they looking for?
It was that second document that was sent through the MOU, which basically just high level gives the outline to to the structure that we would be looking at. And as I said, that's just a document that we put together. We can have further discussions and negotiations on that before it's presented to the DOER. That was just something we put together so that the board had something to review that would give you an idea of what we wanted to get in front of the DOER. It's non-binding. It's just an MOU. It just basically says that the two of us want to enter into discussions about this issue. This is the high-level outline of it, and what do they think?
So you would work with us, kind of get a clear legal opinion into the contracting piece, plus some kind of memorandum of understanding of what the overall deal would be if DOR was going to agree to it. But you're saying that memorandum of understanding is not a contract to move forward,
but
a conceptual plan of what we would do.
Correct. And it gives DOER the opportunity then to review it and make a decision. And they like either come back and say that it needs to be modified, they'd come back and say it's acceptable, or they'd come back and say it's a no. They would be the three options.
All right. Lyndon and Jeff, I have not heard from either of you on this. Do you have any thoughts how you'd like to move forward?
I mean, I have a lot of concerns and questions still, because it's still so many unknowns and it's new. So if it's going to be costly and time consuming, I'm not really big on pursuing it at this time. I think we have other things we need to direct our attention to. If it's a one pager that Ron can take a look at and do quickly, just as to find out a little bit more information for the proposal, I'm fine with that. But I don't see putting a lot of resources in it right now.
Jeff?
My only concern would be, the town committing town resources to maintaining a private property when, we have such a limited DPW as it is, if that's what the resources are going to entail. So, but otherwise, I would support the wishes of the TA in looking into this further, because we need the revenue.
Yeah, it's the revenues. I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, between rec and the revenue here, I mean, you could be cutting our structural deficit in half. I mean, that's.
But let's not commit any DPW resources to vegetation that's lawn mowing. That they're overtaxed now, but.
The heavy lifting would come after the DOER made a determination. That is when the heavy lifting in town resources would come.
So can we get a better understanding of this project with minimal, I guess, staff effort on your part? If it's just an MOU and a conversation with DOER, and it sounds like AMP's going to pay for the legal services anyway, is this something that maybe we can just explore a little bit more without putting too much of our treasure into it?
So I'm not against exploring it a little bit more. As to how much work is, I'm not sure yet, because it's, like I say, it's new. I'm not against kind of moving a little bit in this direction and seeing where it's going to come out, but I don't want to spend a massive amount of time without DOER signing off on this. So I guess I would say this: I'm willing to kind of start the process and talk to AMP on this and see what it's going to take to create an agreement. I forget the term that we just used. MOU, a memorandum of understanding. So I can talk to them and see what they got for mileage. We can talk with the attorneys. They're willing to at least pay the attorney's fees. We can kind of start that process. And if it looks like it's going to be very complicated, I'm going to tell AMP to the attorneys what it's going to cost for our attorneys to do it, and see if AMP wants to continue going forward, But I'm not against trying. I just, like I say, if it gets too much, I'm going to let you guys know, and we'll have to come back and revisit it. That's all.
Okay. Leah, did you have your hand up as well?
Yes, I think this was touched on. My brain is not processing, probably because it's late. The reason for not just going between the private landowner and AMP in this case is partially because of the smart tariffs and everything. There's a benefit to that, right? So that's why it's kind of bringing the town in. Am I correct in that? I'm trying to conceptualize why. So
the benefit is it is part of this. I don't know if this is the SMART program or what, but if a town has involvement, the developer gets an extra incentive fee for the project to make it more even viable. The high cost of getting the money from the solar field to the substation is very expensive because it's a long distance for this. So they really believe that that incentive for making the town a partner is what makes this project viable. Without that, they're not convinced that the project itself is viable. So that's why they're going down this stream. He said that in terms of the contract, what it would be is the AMP, because they have the contract with the property owner, AMP would contract us to be the operator of the facilities. That's how, so the private owner, we would never deal with the private owner of property. We would only be contracting with AMP through this process. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think there's a financial incentive to involve the town from kind of AMP's perspective to involve the town in this.
Yeah. For them, not for us.
Yes.
But we would get some kind of management fee as a result of that process. But
that's their reason for including the town versus just making it a private thing between them and and them. And if I may, one other thing, would any of this impact the potential? I know the Heights property one and the Wheeler Road one, the two town ones, are kind of stalled because of capacity issues. Would bringing a project of this size on completely and totally nix those? Because those are two projects that, if they were able to go forward, would be sole income for the town.
So Lawrence is saying, and correct me, Lawrence, if I'm wrong, but Lawrence is saying they already have an agreement with the state to provide energy to a substation. So this has no impact on those projects.
Right. It sounds like, in my understanding, just to tack on to Leah's question so you answer both at the same time, it sounds like Lawrence had indicated that wattage or that capacity was already allocated through Treasure Valley prior to this even becoming a fruition. Right. So that should have no impact whatsoever on other projects trying to locate in town that we're currently working. Is that where we're headed?
That's correct. The capacity at the substation is ours until we tell them we don't want it. If we say we don't want it, then it may open up the capacity for you, but they would come with at least $5 million charge to get you the 3 megawatts AC capacity left in the.
So just kind of finish your kind of question. The Wheeler Road and the Heights property have different issues. They are part of a whole proposed study for getting energy to the substation there. And the problem is now the state wants them to do another study, and the company keeps pouring more and more money into the project, and they're not sure if it's going to move forward. So their determination right now of do they really want to go forward with the extra cost that National Grid is proposing on them? And the general answer we're getting from them is they don't think they're going to move forward. So they have the ability to sell those projects to another solar company. So I know that Beth is reaching out to talk to other solar companies to see if there might be a potential in buying that project from Select and allowing another company to move forward. But that's they have to do it within like a 30-day time period. So I know that's being looked at, and Beth was working on it, but I'm not sure where that's at.
Yeah, I think that would indicate that Sol Systems is not going to move forward with the Delvin, or there's just a high cost associated.
Yeah.
All right, Leah, did that answer your question?
I probably have a lot more, but that's where my brain is right now. Thank you.
Okay. All right, does anybody else on the board have any questions? All right, so Brendan, did you have your hand up, or Jeff?
It's just that it's getting late.
Oh, of course it is.
Move this along somehow.
So I guess, Mr. Chairman, from what I'm getting from the board is to continue to work with AMP to see if we can get an MOU and those legal issues kind of revolve. The main thing, also talk to Beth and see if she could help us in terms of framing out what the value of the project would be. That's kind of the sense I got from the board. Is that correct?
Does anyone have any objections?
I would just like to see involvement from Beth and potentially legal on the sooner side than creating an MOU and then going to Beth. I would kind of like to have a little bit of an expert town-driven perspective on the earlier side.
How would we engage Beth? Do we have to, because we'd have to pay her, obviously. Is that something that we would
we would be willing to take care of that and appoint Beth directly, as long as you felt that us paying for her wouldn't compromise her impartiality.
Okay, I think that that's fair. Leah, you've worked with Beth before. Is that an acceptable solution?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I haven't worked super closely with her. I kind of came on at the tail end of it, but I'm very impressed with her. So I think that's an acceptable solution. I just like an additional kind of expert on it, if that's okay.
And that would also probably help out Ron with taking some stuff off his plate if a lot of the lifting is being done by her and she's just reporting back. This is my recommendation.
Okay, I'm okay with that too.
All right.
Thank you all.
As it gets later, this deal gets better. Maybe we should just keep going here. But all right. Well, thank you all. If there are no objections, I don't think we need a motion. I think Ron is pretty set as to maybe next steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
All right.
So just a final question. Did you want me to reach out to Beth, or did you want to make that first introduction and then she can call me?
Beth, we'll do that together. I'll make the first discussion with Beth, and then I'll tie you guys together.
Okay.
Okay. Next.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate you coming in. Again, apologize it's getting late. We have an item for discussion, 10X strategies, HCA manufacturing / cultivation interest. Victoria, I believe you are here for this item. So Ron, if you want to just tee it off, and then Victoria, feel free to go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. And again, I apologize, Victoria. Since me and you talked today, and I kept seeing you on my screen, I was eager to get to you and kind of jumped you into a different deal. So anyway, I've been approached by Victoria and her company talking about doing, again, this comes under the marijuana law, but it's a new classification called a delivery operator. And I had no idea what a delivery operator was. So I talked to her, effectively they would lease like a 2,500 square foot building. And what it means is to get this license is that people would be able to buy marijuana online. It would go to this facility, and then the facility would actually personally deliver it to online customers in their homes. And we had a lot of conversation about the 3% impact fee, and is there a 3% tax? I need to do a little bit more homework on this. So one of the main questions, and again, it's for her, is I would have to put out another request for information like I did for the retail establishments for this new title called delivery operator. So it's not sure that Victoria's company would get it, but she brought it forward, and I guess I'm kind of looking for the board's intent if it would like me to put another request for information out for this type of, I guess I'd call it almost like a warehouse facility. It's interesting, and it was new to me. I didn't even know a delivery operator existed. But if you have any questions of the specific operation, she can answer it. And then the board wants me to put an RFI out for this, then we'll do it and get another company out. It's not a retail operator, so I guess we have a license available for this type of operation. With that, I turn it over to Victoria.
Thank you so much. And honestly, the purpose of this conversation is really just to see if there is an interest from the board and the town to engage in this. This is one of the newest licenses from the CCC, and it is for the first couple years only for social equity applicants. And I represent one of those social equity applicant companies. They're looking to do a delivery operator license. We are talking to many municipalities. Rutland is obviously of interest to us, but we're trying to be the best partners, and so looking for a community that would be welcoming to this new license. And with that, if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
Well, I think we would need to see something in terms of a plan. I mean, when you're talking about you represent a social equity company, can you just clarify to the board what that means and who that company is, or is that something that you can't share at this time?
Nope, can totally disclose. So I represent Green Hub LLC. The social equity component is actually a verified program from the CCC. And basically what it is, it's to help those that have been disproportionately impacted by marijuana previously being illegal, and now helping them re-enter the market that it is legal in the state of Massachusetts. So I don't know if you've read, but there's been like, you know, a lot of outcry saying that the barrier of entry into the market is quite expensive. And so they have limited this particular license for just these specific applicants as a starting period.
Okay. Does anyone from the board have any questions? I guess, you know, I have a couple questions probably for the town side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're talking about like, what, like essentially like a warehouse? And then would it be cultivation? Would it be delivery? Like, what are we looking at in terms of what's actually going on in the building?
Sure. So the best way that I can describe it is like an Amazon fulfillment center, but much smaller and much more secure. So you only need limited square footage, but all the transactions are happening virtually online. And then the product, you know, a limited amount, because it's not a large product, right? Like it's not a bookcase, is kept in the facility, and then it is brought directly to the consumer's door. So it's really just fulfilling orders, and it's not growing. There shouldn't, you know, it would be like a retail facility in the sense that it's, you know, compact, but there's no actual consumers entering the facility. It's only employees.
Okay. Do we need, would this fall under the zoning, Ron, for our current, like our retail facility? Would it have to be in the same area, zoned area as that, or could this be somewhere else? I mean, I'm just trying to think of logistically where this would go as a project.
It's commercial retail, so, you know, I'd have to find out with David where exactly those zones are, but I think it would be.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Peter, go ahead.
This is a new license type from the CCC. Yes. Yeah, I hate to pour water on this so quickly, but I don't think it's allowed in our current bylaw, because the current bylaw prohibits all licenses that did not exist at the time of the adoption of our bylaw.
That was my question, was did this fall under the bylaw that we had passed, the marijuana bylaw? Because I remember that there are a lot of different subgroups.
We could probably cover that in the marijuana bylaw. Is that?
I'm not sure how. I need to pull that bylaw back up. That was my question though. That people.
I do have it up, and I mean I can actually share it if you're interested. If I can figure out how to. Computers, excuse me. Let's.
No worries, it's 2021, right? The struggle with Zoom.
You also have to understand, I am a computer programmer by trade, and I hate computers. But this section that I hope you're seeing right now, you can see it. I'm sorry.
You can see it.
Okay, lays out the license types granted by the CSE, what we call classification, and the districts in which they're allowed. And we created districts. Yes, I was involved in writing the bylaw. We assigned each classification or each license classification to a district. And unfortunately, any marijuana related business not listed above, excluding marijuana, is prohibited.
So when you first approached in this, or when it was first approached in this, it was kind of as a cultivator, but this is not. It's not a cultivator at all. It's something other than these items. Does it fit in under any of these classifications? It's hard to tell because it's not a retailer, although it's selling
mail order
customers. But I'm not sure what the heck this is under this category section.
So I'd have to double check, but again, this is like a new license that's just evolving. So I would rather give you accurate information, but I do think the marijuana transporter has been converted to these 2 new delivery licenses. That being said though, it is entirely up to the board's discretion. Obviously, the zoning bylaws and how, and again, this is really just a conversation to see if there's interest from the board and the town to pursue this type of new host community agreement. nothing more than that, just to see if there's an interest and, to continue the conversation, and happy to provide any additional information if needed.
Okay,
Sorry, Mitch, I was gonna say it's Leah, if I may.
go ahead, Leah.
I mean, this probably isn't a surprise to the board. I am supportive of it as long as it, conceptually, as long as it could fit in under our current bylaws. And I'm not sure how that, I would need to understand a little bit more the delivery aspect as well as our bylaw and how those two mesh. So I'm not ready to completely nix it, but I'm not ready to say, yes, gung ho, let's do this. If I know that's probably not the answer that you're looking for after being on the call all night, but that's where I'm coming from, I guess.
Yeah, I think to Leah's point, I conceptually, because the town voted for it, I am for, I guess, opening up if we want to have businesses locate. And I would not be surprised, because Victoria, and doing some research with some of these companies, the CCC has changed some of those licenses around. So I would not be surprised if we went back to Dave and Ron and that this actually would fit under our current zoning. But then again, I'm not going to say 100% sure on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. So conceptually, I would, depending on what you're proposing and depending on what the HCA proposes, be in favor of an additional project. I think we would just need to flesh out the details. And Ron, would you suggest going through another RFI process, or would you suggest in the sense where we have other businesses that come into town that want to locate? I mean, it really just is to what best practice should be in terms of doing this kind of thing.
So my first question, Mr. Chairman, comes to the question of interpretation. So in charters, often when something is up to interpretation, the Board of Selectmen gets to interpret what the charter actually intended to say. This bylaw, I don't know if it's still the Board of Selectmen could interpret the bylaw and interpret what they believe the meaning would be. So could transporter be this new title? I think, if I were to say, I think it's an interpretation of the Board of Selectmen if they think it fits under the bylaw or not. I think at the end of the day, I think it's up to you guys to make that interpretation. Peter, I'll defer to you, but that normally is the way charters are done. I assume bylaws are the same.
I think so. I think the tricky thing about zoning bylaws, though, is they don't come under select board purview. They come under zoning board, planning board, purview. So I don't know who would necessarily need to make that decision. I mean, ultimately the planning board is the permit granting authority. More than that, I don't know that I can give any clarity here.
I think we would probably just shoot this to legal, because again, if the license that we approved changed, and this is the new terminology or something like that, I'm not sure what grounds the zoning or planning board would have to potentially write off a project based on that, given the fluid nature of what's going on at CCC. So I think that needs to be had and worked out in terms of a broader conversation. Is that fair, Peter, in your opinion?
I think that's the absolute best thing to do at this point, is to get that opinion as to who should really make a decision like this. It is a broad decision. It does have impacts to the town, and
I think that's the only question of legal, though, is who interprets of the bylaw. The zoning bylaw, who interprets the meaning of the bylaw is the only question of the attorney. Once they decide that, then it'll be up to that board or commission to make that decision.
Leah and then Jeff.
Thank you. A couple things. I know KP has some marijuana specific attorneys, so they may be up to speed with this evolving new classification, and so they might be the best resource. And my question, I guess, was as to Mitch's point earlier about opening up an RFI or something. My understanding in the past was we weren't absolutely required to do that for anything that didn't have a limited number of licenses. So we did it for the retail establishment because we were limited that number of license. But I don't even know for sure if we necessarily absolutely had to do it for the cultivation. We did because we were putting the retail one out also, and it was kind of our first foray into it. So I think that that's another conversation, that once we know where this falls, whether the board would want to do the RFI or not. I'm kind of undecided right now.
So through you, Mr. Chairman. So
Yep.
my comment to that would be, if it's required or not, I think it's an issue of fair process to everybody that might want to do this, right? So the point of the RFI, it allows anybody that might be interested in doing this to kind of go through a process to be allowed to do this. So just picking one particular company without going through an RFI process, I don't think it's fair to anyone else across the state that might also want to do this. That's why you do the RFI.
Yeah, if we're limiting our licenses, I mean, the other good thing about the RFI process too is I think we found it helpful because we received detailed proposals with figures and numbers and plans, and I think that that's probably it would benefit us whether or not we have to go through it. So that's that's a benefit as well. I just I was getting concerned with the time on these HCA's. So Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good question for legal, but I don't think that the town should have to pay legal expenses when an outside entity comes in asking for an RFI. So my question is, will Victoria's company pay for the legal expenses required with KP Law?
Well, I think you get into it's a hairy situation because you're not guaranteeing the company a license. And I think realistically, the fault is on our end when it comes to interpreting our own zoning. And if there's a discrepancy in the zoning, it's going to have to be something we work out, because whether it's the company Victoria is representing or another company, we're going to eventually have to know the answer anyway. So I know that we have a legal line item budget, and I think that's something that KP can probably answer in the course of a phone call.
Yep. I don't think this is more than a 5 or 10 minute question of the law firm. Like I said, all I want to know is who has the right to interpret it. If this is a zoning bylaw, what board has the right to interpret the bylaws? Is it the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Commission or whatever? But I don't think this is a complicated conversation of the lawyers.
Right. So I think it sounds like the board is looking just for more information. So maybe Ron, if you could clarify a couple of things for us, and then if we have a path forward you want to propose with an RFI process for any company that would like to potentially respond, I think we start there. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do that. Frankly, I'm not sure they really even need a board approval. I wanted to bring it to you guys because you guys allowed already in your bylaw for licenses, but I wanted to bring it for you to see, how many times are we going to keep sending out RFIs for different marijuana licenses? So, I think it's fine. And I think we could open up other licenses too.
Well, are you suggesting, Ron, that we do not need to put this out for an RFI if we were to decide to move on it?
No, I think I would do that no matter what. I'm just not sure I would really need board approval for it because you guys have already approved the amount of licenses you approved. So I'm not sure the board of Selectmen has to approve that. I kind of was just looking for the conceptual because it's your hometown. You guys were involved in the bylaw process. I just wanted to make sure you guys are comfortable with keep going out and doing these RFIs and bring somebody in. Before I went through the whole process, I just kind of wanted to see if you guys were open to the concept.
Okay. All right. Jeff?
Motion to adjourn.
That it? I guess that is it.
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Whitman seconds.
Well, for conversation, I know that it's getting late and I appreciate it, but thank you, Victoria, for coming in. Certainly appreciate it. All right, and there's nothing else on the agenda. So motion and a second to adjourn. We'll have a roll call vote. Whitman?
Whitman, aye.
Nichols?
Nichols, aye.
Billings?
Billings, aye. Good night.
Clark?
Aye.
River City, aye. Thank you all. Have a good week.